Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was the bodyguard of Azula. Naruto is banished from Konoha but gives them the slip and boards a ship. Soon after, he is shipwrecked on Ember Island and is saved by Azula. 3 years later, Naruto is Azula's bodyguard while she hunts for the Avatar, but did he see the last of Konoha? Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 6, Running Away and Catching Up. Location, Naruto. He floated in the air as the fight waged on below him. He knew he was dreaming because the battle below was being fought by shinobi. He didn't know who the man with red hair was, but he knew who his opponent was. The telltale black cloak with a red cloud was visible, marking the red-haired man's opponent as a member of the infamous criminal organization, Akatsuki. "I must admit, you're pretty tough," the blue-skinned shinobi said as he hefted a giant, cloth-covered sword onto his shoulder. "So are you," the red-haired shinobi replied. "But I expected nothing less from the Oomotenai Biju, tailed beast without a tail, dot." He sounded breathless, like the fight had taken a lot out of him. "Ah, so you've heard of me," he commented, sounding pleased. "Any shinobi worth their kunao knows who you are. I also know what you're a part of." "Then you know that you're about to lose," he declared with a bloodthirsty grin on his face, taking the sword from his shoulder. "Kisame," a voice called out from behind him. "You're taking too much time." The voice sounded a little bored, like he didn't really care about what was happening. Kisame turned his head back to look at a black-haired man standing in a tree. "Oh, lighten up, Itake. He'll be done in a few moments," he replied with a slightly chiding voice. "Then it's best if you finish it now. I will not be going down so easily," the red-haired shinobi declared as he flashed through hand seals. "Yatun, Shakuger." He didn't finish the jutsu because at that point, Kisame had shoved his cloth-covered sword into his stomach. "My blade, Samehada, seems to enjoy your chakra," he told the red-haired shinobi. Then he pulled the sword upward, tearing the cloth. What was under the cloth was not a sword made of metal but of shark scales. As the blade cleared the red-haired shinobi, it left a bloody trail on his body, making him stumble to the ground. "Suten, Sukodan no Jutsu, water style, water shark bomb jutsu," Kisame said as the rain all around them formed into a giant shark. The shark then flew straight at the red-haired shinobi, causing him to scream in pain when the jutsu hit. Naruto didn't know how but he could feel the pain as well. "No!" screamed out Naruto as his eyes opened and he lurched upwards. He was in his room, in Udeo. "Are you okay, kid?" the Kyuubi asked. The pain, it was so real, he panted. Sweat caused his night clothes to stick to his body. If he wasn't still reeling from what he had just seen and felt, he would have stripped out of them. But he could still feel the pain. What happened? He knew his Jinchuriki had nightmares, but they never made him wake up in such a fashion. This was something new. I was having a dream. It was the Akatsuki. They were fighting another Jinchuriki, he explained as he tried to get control of his breath back. "Did you know the Jinchuriki?" "No, but I saw the headband. He was from IWA. Also, his hair and beard were red." The fox was silent for a few minutes. "So, they got the Yonbai." "Yonbai?" repeated Naruto. "You just described the Jinchuriki of Yonbai," he explained. Before the blonde could ask another question, he heard a knock on the door. "Lord Naruto, are you alright?" "We heard screaming," a guard outside the door asked. His voice was muffled, but he sounded worried. "Yes, I'm fine," he called out. "It was just a bad dream." "Very well, my lord. Please remember that you're leaving in 2 hours." He looked outside. He had windows installed after the fangirl incident. It was still dark, but he could see the first lights of dawn on the horizon. "Thank you for reminding me." As he listened to the guard leave, he looked out the window. What was with that dream? He wondered. "I don't think it was a dream, Kaki," the Kyuubi told him solemnly. Location, Earth Kingdom. It had been some time after Toph had left her family to join with Aang. Now it was dusk, and they were setting up camp. Since their departure from Jailing, the group did not encounter any problem at all, until when Apple landed on what appeared to be a firm ground, but Toph was not happy at all. On the other hand, Team Guy was nervous when they were flying on the back of a large sky bison. No one back in the elemental nations would believe what the shinobi who found themselves on another continent will say when they boast of encountering hybrid animals on the bending nations. Hey, you guys picked a great campsite. The grass is so soft, Toph noted as she felt the earth around them. That's not grass, Sokka told her as he looked down at the ground. Appa is shedding. Oh, gross. Katara complained, lifting a foot off the fur. She really didn't want to step in sky bison fur. That's not gross, Aang told her. He didn't see what the problem was. It's just a part of spring. You know, rebirth, flowers blooming, and Appa gets a new coat. Aang is most correct. Springtime is so youthful. Lee shouted. Yosh. And you all are in the springtime of your youth. Guy cried out. Don't even think about hugging, Niji warned the two of them. We'll have Toph bury you up to your waists, Tenten threatened. The rest of Team Guy, or any of the others, didn't need to see that again. Ah, the beauty of spring, Katara said with sarcasm as she watched the shinobi team. Appa sneezed at that point, causing a lot of fur to fly upward and fall to the ground, as well as the group. Stop, Appa, stop, she told him as he shook his head, getting rid of any other loose fur. It's not that bad, Katara, Sokka told her. She turned around and saw him crouched on the ground next to Akela. It makes a great wig. He turned around and on top of his head was a tall cone of Appa's fur. Akela had the same thing, but his was smaller. And a great beard, Aang announced as he hopped down from the saddle. He was wearing Appa's fur as a bushy white beard. Both of them laughed at what the other was wearing. Akela just rolled his eyes and pawed the wig off his head. I'm glad we have another girl in the group. There are times you two are disgusting, Katara said as she swept fur off her shoulders. Sometimes, she couldn't believe their antics. It was like they were 5 years old. Toph walked up to Aang and Sokka. Excuse me, does anyone have a razor? Because I've got some hairy pits, she declared as she raised her arms, showing that she had stuffed fur under her armpits. The three of them kept laughing, even more so when Aang had sneezed, slammed into Appa's foot and fell to the ground. Even Katara started to giggle. Team Guy just stared at them all, before finally joining the laughter. This thing is really moving, isn't it? Ty Lee asked, sitting in a chair. She could feel the humming of the engine coming from the floor. So, it would seem, Mai answered as she leaned against the wall. She felt the engine hum as well. She just felt it through the wall. I must hand it to War Minister Chin. He did on a fine job on this, Azula noted. The War Minister had been at Udeo working on a military project. The end result was hybrid of a tank and a train. When he heard that Azula was hunting for the Avatar and had stopped in Udeo, he lent the tank train to her so that she could track him down. The door to the next car opened and one of the engineers stepped inside. Attached to his waist was a safety line so that he wouldn't fall off when trying to get to another car. Princess, we've found a trail on the Avatar. We're following it now, he told Azula. She nodded. Very good. The engineer saluted and left. She turned to Mai. Is Naruto still checking our supplies? Yeah, he's also checking on the mongoose dragons. Hey, Azula, Ty Lee said, sounding nervous. I've got something to tell you. What is it, Ty Lee? It was rare, very rare, to hear the acrobat talk like that. She was always confident and happy about what she said. Well, this morning, while we were still in Udeo, I had woken up early, she began to explain. I wanted to stretch my legs a bit, so I walked around a little. When I walked past Naruto's room, I heard him scream. Both Azula and Mai had an expression of surprise. They've never really heard Naruto scream, at least, not off of the battlefield. Yet, the tone used by Ty Lee sounded alarming to the others, as if she did not know what to do. What happened? Azula asked. It sounded like he had woken up from a dream. Then he started to talk to himself. I didn't hear much, but I did hear the words Akatsuki, Jinchuriki, and Yanbai. At that point, a guard had shown up, so I left. She looked at her two friends. Do you know what those words mean? They shook their heads. There was a part of Naruto's background story that not even Azula and her friends learned, and it was certainly not a kind of story that the banished crown prince would have learned. As Naruto and Zuko never interacted much, even before the latter's banishment, the former did not bother to divulge much of his background to him. Do you think this has something to do with your vision in the swamp? Mai asked Azula. She didn't know why, but she felt it was just so. I don't know. Everything they seemed to learn about her bodyguard's past seemed to have to deal with those people wearing the strange-looking headbands. But something tells me it also has to do with those people from Omashu. The sun had set, and the sky had turned purple. Aang and Sokka were setting up the tent and sleeping bags while Katara dealt with the water. Guy, Lee, and Akela had gone looking for firewood while Neji and Tenten had taken up positions in the trees to keep a lookout. The only person who wasn't doing anything was Toph. She was kicking back and relaxing against a rock with a piece of wheat in her. Took notice, so she went over to Toph. So, Toph, she began. Usually when setting up camp, we try to divide up the work. Hey, don't worry about me. I'm good to go, Toph told her. The earthbender was completely relaxed. She didn't look she was going to be moving from that spot anytime soon. Well, actually what I'm trying to say is some of us might fetch water while someone else might set up the fire pit or put up the tent. Momo flew by with berries in his paws, which he dropped into Katara's hands. Even Momo does his fair share, the waterbender told her. Katara, I'm fine, I can carry my own weight. I don't need a fire, I've already collected my own food and look. She bent two slabs of rock out of the earth to form a triangular shape over her head. My tent's all set up. Katara made a face. Well, that's great for you, but we still need to finish, she tried to say. I don't understand. What's the problem here? Toph demanded, interrupting her. She was becoming impatient and annoyed. Never mind, she said, walking away. Later, Aang was airbending the saddle off Appa's back. He managed to get it on the ground, but he also managed to put it on top of Sokka as well. As this was going on, Katara looked over at Toph and decided to give it another try. In the distance, Tenten started to gather enough firewood as Neji and Guy stood close to the banks of the river and kept an eye out, in case they ever encounter an ambush. It doesn't seem to look like we're going to be attacked soon, Guy-sensei. Neji turned his head to see Lee walk towards them. Anything so far, Lee? Not that I know of, but the geography around here is suitable for an ambush. Lee spotted Katara as she approached Toph. On the other hand, I don't know what to make of the newcomer who is more content with just letting other people do the work for her. Hey Toph, she greeted as she walked back over. I wanted to apologize for earlier. I think we're all just a little tried and getting on each other's nerves. Yeah, you do seem a little tried, Toph told her, not even trying to apologize back. In her mind, she wasn't doing or saying anything wrong. Katara got irritated. I meant all of us, she replied, trying to get her message across, but it didn't. Well, good night. The earthbender told her, crawling into her earth tent. Good night. She gave up and walked away. That night, everyone except Lee and Tenten, who had taken over lookout duty from Neji and Guy, fell asleep. Toph lay in her earth tent sleeping peacefully, but suddenly came awake because of something. She kept her hand on the ground and concentrated, trying to feel what it was. There's something coming towards us. She called out as she came out of her tent. What is it? Aang asked as they joined her. She placed a hand on the earth again. It feels like an avalanche, but also not an avalanche. Your powers of perception are frightening, Sokka noted with sleepy sarcasm. He wanted to back to sleep, but he also knew that he had to try and be alert. Confirm what she's saying, Neji, Guy ordered. Out of all of them, the Hyuga would be able to do so quickly. Neji activated his Byakugan. There is something coming this way and closing in fast, he announced, staring at a certain direction. From said direction, was said something. Should we leave? Katara asked. Better safe than sorry, Aang replied. They quickly broke down camp and boarded Appa. As the sky bison flew away, they all saw smoke in the distance. What is that thing? Katara asked aloud as they looked at the smoke that looked like it was following them. I don't know, but I don't want to find out right now, Sokka told her. They had flown a good distance. When they finally decided to land, Toph was the first to get off. I'll land, sweet land, she said as she apparently hugged the ground. See you guys in the morning, she told them as she hopped up and started to walk away. Actually, can you help us unload? Katara asked. They could use everyone's help with that. Really, you need me to help unload Sokka's and Lee's funky-smelling sleeping bags? When he heard this, Lee took a sniff from his bag and fainted from the smell. Sokka saw this and brought his bag down to Akela. The wolf backed up immediately with his tail between his legs. Sorry. Sokka apologized instantly. Well yeah, Katara told her. That and everything else, you're a part of our team now and... Look, I didn't ask you to help unload my stuff. I'm carrying my own weight, Toph told her off before walking away. That's not the point, she said, going after her. Ever since you joined us, you've been nothing but selfish and unhelpful. What? Exclaimed the earthbender. Look here, Sugar Queen. I gave up everything I had so I could teach Aang earthbending, so don't you talk to me about being selfish. She sat down and bent another tent out from the ground, effectively ending the conversation. Sugar Queen? Demanded Katara. The response she got was a slab of rock coming out of the ground and covering the opening of the earth tent. Did you just slam the door in my face? How can you be so infuriating? As they watched Katara essentially throw a tantrum around the tent, Aang looked at Sokka with apprehension. Likewise, Team Guy also hesitated to intervene in the argument between the two girls. Should we do something? Aang asked. He didn't know how to deal with this kind of situation, seeing as he never grew up with the opposite sex. Hey, I'm just enjoying the show, Sokka told him. He enjoyed it whenever Katara lost her cool and it wasn't directed at him. Aang decided to approach Katara. Okay. You both need to calm down, he said to her, making her stop the tantrum. Both? She asked before whipping around to face Aang with a look that could have possibly terrified a Biju. I'm completely calm. I can see that, he said, doing the wise thing and backing off. That's enough. Tenten barked. She stepped in front of Katara, blocking her off from Topha's tent. We don't need to fight amongst ourselves when we're also battling exhaustion as well. Guy nodded. I agree. A good shut-eye will calm everyone down. He frowned. Though I wonder what is up with the smoke earlier. Later, everyone was trying to sleep, everyone except Katara. The stars sure are beautiful tonight. Too bad you can't see them, Toph. She called out, feeling moody and spiteful. Topha's response was to bend a rock line at Katara, sending her up into the air and landing on top of Sokka and Akela, who slept next to the tribesmen. Hey, how's a guy and a wolf supposed to sleep with all this yelling and earthquaking? Sokka demanded after pushing Katara off of him. Akela barked in agreement. The earth tent's door fell back into the ground and Toph appeared. That thing is back, she announced, getting their attention again. Well, how far away is it? Maybe we can close our eyes, just for a few minutes. The tribesman asked, trying to cover himself with his sleeping bag. He really wanted to sleep. Aang noticed the incoming smoke. I don't think so, Sokka. He began to get out of his sleeping bag. It was wishful thinking to begin with anyway, he grumbled mostly to himself. They quickly got everything aboard Appa and flew away again, but the smoke was still there, following them. This time, Niji struggled to keep himself awake as his eyes drooped. Tenten grabbed her kunao and hid it under her sleeve, in preparation for a possible battle. Seriously, what is that thing? Katara asked aloud, not really expecting an answer. And how does it keep finding us? Toph also asked. I don't know. But this time, I'm going to make sure we lose it, Aang told them. As he had Appa pour on the speed, the others just dozed. It seems like we're speeding up, Naruto noted. He could feel the engine humming faster through his feet. There was also that slight pull of gravity it had on him. Azula looked at her bodyguard. She grew worried that her bodyguard was tiring himself out. Just after lunch, the blonde almost tripped while the drill continued to move. Naruto, she began. Why don't you go to sleep? You've been awake since early this morning and have been working hard since. You need the rest. She's right, Mai agreed. The guy looked practically dead on his feet. Yeah, go and sleep, Naruto. We'll be with the mongoose dragons in the last car, Ty Lee chimed in. Seeing as he had no argument, he nodded, but grew serious. Alright, but I want you to wake me either when it's morning or we've caught up with the Avatar. Azula smiled. Sleep well, Naruto, she told him as she left the car along with Ty Lee and Mai. Appa finally landed on a flat part of a mountain. He landed and rolled onto his side, letting everyone in his saddle fall out onto the ground. Neji activated his Byakugan to scan the area for new threats coming to them, but only found the distant smoke coming closer towards them. Okay, forget about setting up camp. I'm finding the softest piece of dirt and going to sleep, Sokka told them as he scooted away in his sleeping bag. Akela followed tiredly after him. That's good because Toph wasn't going to help anyway, Katara said snidely. Oh, I didn't realize baby needed someone to tuck her in bed, Toph retorted. That's enough, you two, Guy commanded. They didn't any more of this arguing. We don't need any more tensions, as Tenten may have already dealt with it. Yeah, there's something after us and we don't even know what or who it is, Aang told them as he tossed his shawl over his head. He was just as tired as Sokka and wanted to sleep just as badly. It could be Zuko. We haven't seen him since the North Pole, Katara suggested. Truth be told, she was getting nervous about not seeing him around. Who's Zuko? Toph asked. Sokka gave her a summary. Oh, just some angry freak with a ponytail who's tracked us all over the world. What's wrong with ponytails, ponytail? Katara asked his brother with humor in her tried voice. This is a warrior's wolf tail, he replied without even lifting his face off the ground, pointing at his hair. Well, it certainly tells the other warriors that you're fun and perky. She replied but yelped as Akela growled lightly at that comment. Oh, stop, Akela. You know she was kidding, Sokka told him. Anyway, who's ever chasing us couldn't have followed us here. So, now would everyone just shush? He lay back on his sleeping bag and tried to fall asleep. But Momo landed on his chest and started to make a racket. No, Momo, shush. Sleepy time. Momo just went over his head, straight to the edge and continued to make noise. The tribesman was the first one to get the point. Oh, don't tell me, he groaned as he put his head on the ground. That's impossible, Aang protested. There's no way they could have tracked us. He had Appa fly faster and put more distance between them and whoever it was that was following them. I can feel it with my own 2 feet. Toph told him. He ran over to the edge to look. Sure enough, there was the smoke and the tank train coming at them. Let's get out of here, Katara suggested. Maybe we should face them, find out who they are. Who knows? Maybe they're friendly, Aang suggested in turn. Always the optimist, Sokka commented. The air nomad always did seem to believe that everyone was a potential friend to them. I don't think our unwanted guests are friendly, Neji said darkly, his Byakugan still activated. The tank train stopped and the car opened its side door. To Aang's and Katara's surprise, out of the smoke that bellowed out from the car, came Azula, Ty Lee, and Mai on mongoose dragons. The mongoose dragons then began to run up the trail that led Aang's group. It's those 3 girls from Omashu, Katara exclaimed. They all got ready to fight, taking stances and drawing weapons. We can take them, Toph declared, 3 on 3. Actually, Toph, there's 8 of us, Sokka told her. She didn't count him or Team Guy. Yeah, did you forget about us? Tenten asked, keeping her left hand over her shuriken holster, and her right hand over her hidden kunao. Oh, I'm sorry, Toph said. I didn't count you guys. You know. No bending and all. She wasn't trying to be rude, but she thought because they weren't benders, they wouldn't be able to hold their own in a fight. Sokka got mad at the causal dismissal of their abilities. We can still fight. he told her angrily. Akela seemed to glare at her as well. Okay, 3-on-3 plus Sokka, Guy, Lee, Niji, and Tenten, she amended, trying to be a bit nicer and missing by a wide mark. That attitude will kill you one day, Toph, Niji remarked as Sokka reined in his temper. If she kept up with it, then she would be completely caught off guard when the day came that she fought a non-bender who could hold their own against her. She said nothing in return, having returned her focus back to the incoming threat. She bent large rocks to come out of the ground randomly in front the three girls. The mongoose dragons they were riding just simply climbed over them. Well, that didn't work, she thought. Well, we wanted to find out who they were, we found out. Now let's get out of here, Sokka told them. They all ran back to Appa and climbed aboard. Toph stayed at the edge and bent a big wall out of the surrounding rock to block the girls. Urging her mongoose dragon on, Azula blew open a hole in the wall by generating and directing lighting at it. They climbed through the hole and Mai shot off some small arrows at Toph. She bent the rock beneath her up into the air, which blocked the arrows and allowed her to jump off and land in Appa's saddle. Appa, yip, ordered Aang once he knew that she was aboard. Guys, I need a barrage. Tenten told her teammates. They nodded and the three of them reached for either their kunai or shuriken. They proceeded to hurl whatever they had at the three girls, trying to slow them down. Both Mai and Ty Lee pulled back a bit to avoid the barrage, but Azula melted a hole in the barrage with her firebending. The kunai and shuriken fell harmlessly around her. They got away, she noted. She turned around and headed back over to her friends. Let's head back to the tank train. We'll still be able to track them. The two girls nodded in agreement. As they went back, Ty Lee looked at Azula. Why didn't we wake Naruto? She asked. She had thought that was the first thing they should have done. Because he needs the rest, Azula answered, honestly believing it. Besides, we didn't catch the Avatar. Appa flew on but even he was getting tired. I can't believe those girls followed us all the way from Omashu, Katara said from where she sat in the saddle. I still think we could have taken them, Toph grumbled. They had the better advantage, why didn't they use it? Are you kidding me? The waterbender asked. The crazy blue firebending and the flying daggers are bad enough, but last time we saw them, one of those girls did something that took my bending away. That's scary. She had never felt so helpless before in her life when that had happened to her. I remember Lady Hinata telling me about that, Niji said. It sounds similar to the Jukin. He was curious to see if the two styles were similar in any way. Tenten noticed that Lee had a troubled look on his face. What's the matter, Lee? She asked him, concerned. It's just something been bugging me, and I find it unyouthful, Ge told her, a frown etched onto his face. What? Those three girls were the same ones from Omashu, right? He asked Katara. Yeah, that's right. It was hard to forget them. They made quite the impression with that first meeting. What are you getting at, Lee? Guy asked his student. If they are the same three girls, where was Naruto? He thought the blonde was supposed to be always right next to the Fire Nation princess. And yet, they didn't see him. That kid you were talking about back at home? Toph asked Niji, who nodded in reply. Before they could ponder the question further, they noticed that the sky was getting lighter. Oh no, the sun is rising, Sokka groaned pointing to the east where the sun was above a mountain. We've been up all night with no sleep. Sokka, we'll be okay, Aang reassured him. Are you sure? I've never not slept before. What if I fall asleep now and something happens? And something always happens. He asked, beginning to freak out. Akela bit him in the leg, making him yelp in pain. Once he was done, he looked down at the wolf. Thanks Akela. I needed that. Akela just yawned in reply. Every time we land, those girls are there. So, we'll just have to keep flying, Katara told her brother. It seemed like the perfect idea at that moment. We can't keep flying forever, Aang replied. They were going to have to land at some point. Well, why don't you land right now and let them catch up? Toph suggested. We can still take them, even if they have that Naruto guy. She knew and they knew that they had the advantage. Toph, that Naruto guy, as you call him, defeated 4 of our teammates easily, Guy told her. So? You guys aren't benders. It wouldn't take that much to beat you, she said a little dismissively. I think you've spent too much time with the most unyouthful master Lee commented. She bristled at that comment. She was nothing like him. Also, Toph, Sokka said before she could reply. Naruto isn't a bender and he can see through the earth's vibrations as well. She was stunned. She thought she was the only one who could do it. Appa kept flying and flying as the day went on. So, what's our plan? Aang asked in a tried voice. Don't know. Too tried to think, Toph told him. Her eyes were closed and she didn't have the energy to open them again. I'm sure we'll come up with something after a short nap, Katara said. Yes, sleep, Sokka agreed wholeheartedly. The two fell asleep. Then they started to float in the air above the saddle. Both Toph and Team Guy did as well, even Akela and Momo. Momo grabbed onto Toph's leg and Akela bit down on a saddle handle. They were shocked awake when they realized that they were only floating because Appa was falling. What's going on? Demanded Toph. Aang was hanging on by the rope. Appa fell asleep. He yelled. As they fell, Sokka brought Katara in closer while Team Guy made sure they didn't let go of each other. Aang had managed to bring himself down to Appa's head and then scooted down to his face. Wake up, buddy! He cried. As they neared a forest, Appa finally managed to wake up. He pulled into himself up a bit to fly but he still was doing. After finally going through some trees, he crash-landed on the ground, making all the birds fly away. Aang slipped off Appa's head. Appa's exhausted, he stated the obvious. Akela barked out something that not only the other animals but even the humans could tell was sarcastic. If Kiba had been there, what Akela had barked would have roughly translated to thank you, Captain Obvious. What tipped you off? Okay, we've put a lot of distance between us and them. The plan right now is to follow Appa's lead and get some sleep, Sokka said as he walked from Appa with his sleeping bag. Team Guy got off of the Sky Bison as well. They were a little better off, but not by a lot. Katara, tried and irritable, decided to beat an already dead horse. Of course, we could have gotten some sleep early if Toph didn't have such issues, she said in a completely snarky tone of voice. What? Screamed Toph as she slammed her hands on the ground, creating a crack. All right, Aang cut in, trying to stop the fight before it started. Everyone's exhausted, let's just get some rest. No. I want to hear what Katara has to say, the Earthbender said. You think I have issues? She asked Katara. I'm just saying, she began, maybe if you helped earlier, we could have set our camp faster and gotten some sleep. And then maybe we wouldn't be in this situation. You're blaming me for this. Toph demanded as she came near Katara, who threw her sleeping bag down and gave her a bring it motion with her hands. Meanwhile, Sokka tried to go to sleep, but was distracted by what was going on. Aang quickly said, No. She's not blaming you. He tried to get in between them, play peacemaker. Neji touched the airbender's shoulder and shook his head. That's a bad idea, getting between two angry women, he said. Guy and Lee nodded in agreement. It was an even worse idea when said women could hear what you said. Aang still got in the middle of it. No, I'm blaming her. Katara shouted. Hey. Toph barked as she tossed Aang out of the way, proving the point of the male shinobi. I never asked you for diddly-doo-dah. I carry my own weight. Besides, if there's anyone to blame, it's Shetty over here. She pointed at Appa. What? You're blaming Appa? Aang asked. He couldn't believe anyone would try and blame the Sky Bison. Yeah, you want to how they keep finding us? He's leaving a trail everywhere we go. Toph told them as she grabbed some loose fur from Appa and let it float away, proving her point. How dare you blame Appa? He told her, coming to his bison's defense. He saved your life 3 times today. If there's anyone to blame, it's you. You always talk about how you carry your own weight but you're not, he is. Appa is carrying your weight. He never had a problem flying when it was just the 7 of us. She waited as he yelled at her and then walked away from him. Earthbending her pack into her hands, she put it around her back. "I'm outta here," she stated. Sokka and Akela stood in front of her, blocking her path. "Wait," the tribesman told her. She simply bent him and Akela out of the way and continued walking. A few minutes after Toph had disappeared from their sight, the reality of what Aang and Katara did hit them. "What did I just do?" Aang asked with big eyes. "I can't believe I yelled at my earthbending teacher. Now she's gone." "I know," Katara told him. "We're all just trying to use to each other, and I was so mean to her." She couldn't believe that she had let her anger take control like that. She was usually more level-headed. "Yeah, you two were pretty much jerks," Sokka told them with Akela nodding in agreement. He sat on the ground nearby with a drink in his hand. The shinobi team stayed silent and kept a lookout. "Thanks, Sokka," Katara said. "No problem." She helped Aang off the ground. "We need to find Toph and apologize." Sokka finished the drink in his hand. "Okay, but what are we going to do about the tank full of dangerous ladies and possibly Naruto chasing us?" he asked them. It seemed like quite the problem. Aang looked over at Appa and grabbed some of the shedding fur. "I have a plan," he said as he watched the fur float away. They got Appa into the nearby river and gave him a bath. Aang and Katara bent the water out of the river and onto Appa while Sokka, Team Guy, and even Momo scrubbed him down. As they did that, the loose fur that Appa had went down the river. After they were done, Appa now stood on the bank with no more loose fur. Toph was right. Appa's fur was leading a trail right to us, Aang explained. But now that he's clean, no more trail. "Are he's okay to fly?" Katara asked. Even though the bison was freshly cleaned, he looked exhausted. "Appa does kinda seem a little tired," Tenten noted. "He'll be fine as long as we leave his saddle and all our stuff here," Aang told them. "Then it's a good thing we already hid them," Niji said. Before they had cleaned Appa, they had taken the saddle and everything that was in it and concealed it in the nearby forest. Unless someone really looked, they wouldn't see it. Sokka looked over at Akela. "Akela, I want you to guard the stuff." "Can you do that?" he asked. The wolf just gave him a look. "Right, sorry. Forgot who I was talking to," he apologized as they all climbed aboard. Aang hadn't. He grabbed a nearby bag and began collecting fur that was on the ground. "I'm going to use Appa's fur to make a fake trail to lead the tank off course. You guys use Appa to try and find Toph." "Aang, that's not a good idea. You should have someone go with you," Sokka told him. "Sokka is correct. Lee or I should follow you," Guy said. The only words to come out of Aang's mouth were, "Appa, yip yip." The sky bison was up and flying away before anyone could get off. The air nomad turned around and flew off in the opposite direction, the fur in the bag already falling out. Toph kept walking as she near a forest. Suddenly she stopped as she felt a presence nearby. Taking no chances, she bent a rock line to behind a nearby boulder, where she heard a grunt of pain. Climbing stop the boulder, she looked at the person she had attacked. The person turned out to be an old man rubbing his rear end. "That really hurt my tailbone," Iroh said to himself. Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee stood outside the tank train at the riverbank where Appa had landed. Sticking her hands into the water, Azula picked up some of the fur to examine it. "Wads of wet fur, how delightful," Mai commented with boredom. Ty Lee put on a thinking expression. They're not wads. They're more like bundles or bunches. It's gotten a sound," she said aloud. "Clumps," Mai finally suggested after watching her try to find the right word. She perked up immediately. "Clumps, they're clumps." She cheered as she gave Mai a hug. Mai noticed the trail of fur leading away from the area. "The trail goes this way," she told Azula after breaking the hug with Ty Lee. Azula had been kneeling down to examine the fur left on the ground. Turning around, she noticed that a couple of nearby trees had the tops broken, like something had smashed through them. "The Avatar is trying to give us the slip," she announced. "You two head in that direction and keep your eye out for the bison," she ordered, pointing at the broken tree tops. She walked over to the fur on the ground. I'll follow this trail. Hold on, Azula, Ty Lee spoke up. We should wake up Naruto. She shook her head. We'll be done soon enough. With any luck, they would have the Avatar before her bodyguard ever woke up. But Naruto told us to wake him up when it was morning. We've let him sleep long enough. Then he can sleep a little longer. I can handle the Avatar on my own and you two can take care of his friends, she insisted. But Azula. This conversation is over, Ty Lee, she told her. Get moving. Both Mai and Ty Lee mounted their mongoose dragons and went off. Azula briefly looked their way and then began to follow the trail of fur. Aang flew on his glider away from the forest and into the desert. Checking on the bag, he realized that the amount of fur he had was almost gone. Looking ahead, he saw a small town in the desert. Landing at the edge, he noticed a small sign that read Tuzin. He figured it was the name of the town. He walked through the village, dropping fur and keeping an eye out as he went. Finally stopping and dropping the rest of the fur and the bag onto the ground, he opened his glider. About to fly away, he stopped and turned back around to look the trail of fur. Making his choice, he closed his glider, sat down on the ground, and waited. While Katara flew Appa, the others looked around to see if Toph was. Toph couldn't have made it too far, Sokka said. No one was able to see her, even while flying on Appa. That may be, Tenten said. But I still don't see her. Worry not, Tenten. Guy announced. Our flames of youth will surely find our friend. Yosh. If we can't do that, we will do 10,000 around the village when we return. And if we can't do that, then we'll do 50,000 push-ups with 200 pounds on our backs. Lee said in excitement. Before anyone could say anything, Niji, who had his Byakugan active, tensed up. We've got incoming. He shouted. Momo started to growl as he looked down on the ground. Sokka came over to where Momo was. What is it, Momo? Oh no. He began to ask but instead shouted in surprise when he saw what was coming after them. It was Mai and Ty Lee. Katara. He yelled out to his sister, turning to her. How did they find us? She asked before urged Appa forward. Appa, come on. We need to go faster. The tribesmen urged the bison on. Appa couldn't go any faster. He's too tired. Katara told them. Not good, not good. Sokka looked to what was ahead. We just need to make it across that river. If they could do that, then they would be safe. Appa had begun to descend quickly, his tiredness getting to him. Come on Appa, just a little further. Katara urged as he began to crash through the top of trees. Taking a chance, Mai fired off small darts aimed at Sokka. He leapt back to avoid having his head pierced. Appa reached the river, but instead of flying over it, he schemed through it before crashing into the opposite bank. Because of the crash, Lee and Guy flew off Appa and crashed into a tree, knocking them unconscious. Niji and Tenten also flew off, but they flew into the woods. Sokka, Katara, and Momo were the only ones who stayed on Appa. Sokka stood up to look behind them. We made it. We're safe, he announced when he couldn't see the girls. You did it, Appa. Katara cheered. They got off the tried sky bison and gave each other a big hug. They were about to try and wake up Guy and Lee when Katara gasped. Looking back at the other side of the river, Sokka saw the two girls still riding their mongoose dragons. When they reached the riverbank, they didn't even slow down. The mongoose dragons ran across the water. Katara reacted by bending the water in the river into a deluge and sending it at the two of them. While Mai simply had her mount step to the side, Ty Lee leapt from hers just before it was hit by the water. Katara uncorked her water pouch as she waited for Ty Lee to land. She didn't land right away. She leapt off a few trees before landing in front of Katara. Ducking under the water whip, she tried to jab at Katara. The waterbender dodged the jabs and responded with water discs, which she cartwheeled out of the way. While this happened, Mai had crossed the river. Once she reached the bank, she shot off some small darts at Katara. Sokka moved in and blocked them with his club and boomerang. He threw his boomerang at Mai. She jumped off her mongoose dragon and shot off another round of small darts, this time from her leg. Sokka also swiped those away. Mai decided to run after Katara, surprising him momentarily. That was all Ty Lee needed to get in close and hit him in the right arm, making him drop the retrieved boomerang. He turned and tried to hit her with his club, but she hit that arm as well. It went limp and the club fell from his grasp. He tried kicking her but she made the leg go limp too. Swaying on one leg, he lost his balance and fell forward. She took that opportunity to hit him in the head. It didn't quite work out the way she wanted. She clutched her in pain and glared at the tribesman. Good try, but no. He told her. Meanwhile, Katara ran to the bank to bend water at Mai. She stopped the waterbender by throwing knives at her. The knives pinned Katara to a tree behind her and made her lose control of the water, which just fell back into the river. Sokka showed up hopping away from Ty Lee. He fell down in front of Katara. How are you doing? He asked her. Well, you know. It was the only thing she could think to say. I thought that when Ty Lee and I finally got you guys, it would be more exciting, Mai told them. She then felt a kunao on her throat. Does round 2 sound good to you? Tenten asked from behind her. Niji also appeared behind Ty Lee. The two girls jumped away from the shinobi. They got ready to fight but they didn't expect what came next. The two of them were once again sent flying via airbending from Appa's tail. They flew right into the river. Thanks Appa. I don't know what we do without you, Sokka told him. Appa responded by licking him in the face, to his discomfort. Appa! Scolded Tenten. I wanted to fight that girl, why did you have to go and do that? Niji stood above Sokka. With a few jabs in the right places, functionality was restored to his limbs. Can we worry about that later, Tenten? He asked her as he helped the tribesmen up. We need to wake up Guy-sensei and Lee. I think the third girl went after Aang. They quickly woke Guy and Lee up. Then they boarded Appa and then flew off. As they flew away, Mai and Ty Lee waded out of the river and onto the bank. Was it just me or was that guy kinda cute? Ty Lee asked as she got the water out of her braid. Which one are you talking about? There were 2 of them, Mai told her. You know what? Never mind. Aang finally noticed that someone was coming. At first, he saw only a shadow and a dust trail but as the shadow got closer to the town, he saw that it was the same girl who had chased after him in Omashu. Once she had entered the town, she got off the mongoose dragon and walked forward. Alright, you've got up with me. Now who are you and what do you want? Aang asked her. You mean you haven't guessed? You don't see the family resemblance. She asked back, sounding a little amused. Guy and his team seem to know who you are. But I want to hear it from your mouth. Well then, here's a hint. She put a hand over her left eye. I must find the avatar to restore my honor, she said in a false deep voice. He said nothing and just stared at her. It's okay, you can laugh. It's funny, she told him as she brought down her hand. So, what now? Now. She repeated. Now, it's over. You're tired and you have no place to go. You can run, but I'll catch you. She was certain of that fact. She would find him, and she would capture him. He stood up. I'm not running, he declared. When she heard that, she gave a little smirk. This was just too perfect. Once again, Naruto was floating in the air. But he also could feel tremendous pain. Looking down, he saw a giant statue that had 9 eyes. About 5 of the eyes had pupils in them while the other 4 did not. The mouth was opened, and it appeared to be eating a large amount of chakra. The source of chakra was coming from the same red-haired shinobi Naruto had seen fighting Kisame. He was floating in the air surrounded by chakra. Also, some form of pink chakra was coming out of his eyes and mouth. Forcing himself to ignore the pain, he looked down at the statue's hands. On 9 of the fingers, he saw people standing on them. Some were just images, and some were actually there but Naruto knew who they were just by looking at the red cloud design on their cloaks. The Yonbai is finally sealed, one member of the Akatsuki announced. All of the chakra had disappeared into the statue and the red-haired shinobi fell down to the ground, dead. The statue now had another eye with a pupil in it. The pain had disappeared, but then something odd happened. The statue's eyes swerved to look at him, even though he wasn't there. A deep voice came from the statue's mouth. You could have stopped them. You could have saved him. The voice roared at him. While Naruto was visibly shocked, it seemed the members of Akatsuki were as well. It was then, with horror, Naruto realized that the pain he felt was what the red-haired shinobi was feeling when the Yonbai was being taken out of him. Kit, wake up. The Kyuubi's voice rang out. Naruto opened his eyes and realized that he was still in the tank train. Why did I see that? He asked as he gasped for breath, sitting up from the makeshift bunk he had made. Are you okay? I saw the Akatsuki sealing the Yonbai. Will you be alright? Yeah. He looked around the compartment. He noticed that the side door was open, and daylight was streaming in. Wait a minute, daylight. He thought. He rushed out of the compartment and saw that it was the middle of the afternoon. Looking over to the engine, he saw the engineers standing outside. One of them noticed him and waved at him. Lord Naruto, you're awake. Where is Azula? The blonde demanded as he walked up to the engineers. The princess? Asked the engineer. She and her friends left to search for the avatar. Her friends went off in one direction while she went in another. Why didn't they wake me? He immediately demanded. His eyes narrowed as he growled in frustration, furious at Azula's dismissal of his advice when it comes to the avatar. He began to mentally draw up reasons to chew Azula out for later. I told them to wake me up when it was either daylight or they had found the avatar. I don't know, my lord. The princess told us not to disturb you and then left. Which way did she go? HH grabbed the engineer's shirt, wanting an answer. She went that way. He told him nervously, pointing at the trail of fur. Naruto let go of the engineer and proceeded to run in the direction the fur was leading. Once he was sure the engineers couldn't see him anymore, he increased his speed and ran even faster. You better not be doing something stupid, Azula. After getting over the initial confusion, Toph sat down with Iroh as he brewed some tea. Once the tea was brewed, he poured it into 2 crude cups and handed one to Toph. Here is your tea, he told her. As she stayed silent, he looked at her. You seemed to be a little too young to be traveling alone. You seemed to be a little too old, she replied as she took the cup. He gave a small laugh at the comment. Perhaps I am. I know what you're thinking, Toph said. I look like I can't handle being by myself. I wasn't thinking that, Iroh objected. You wouldn't let pour my own cup of tea. She pointed out. She had never poured tea for herself. Her parents wouldn't have let her. I poured your tea because I wanted to and for no other reason, he explained. She didn't know why, but she started to talk about herself to him. She felt that she could trust him. People see me and think I'm weak. They want to take care of me. But I can take care of myself, by myself. You sound like my nephew, Iroh told her. Always thinking you need to do things on your own, without anyone's support. There is nothing wrong with letting people who love you help you. Not that I love you, he quickly assured her. I just met you. She gave a small laugh at that. So, where is your nephew? I've been tracking him actually, he admitted as he took a small sip of his tea. Is he lost? He lowered his cup. Yes, a little bit. His life has recently changed and he's going through very difficult times. He's trying to figure out who he is, and he went away. So now you're following him? She asked him. I know he doesn't want me around right now, but if he needs me, I'll be there. And that was a promise he intended to keep. Your nephew is very lucky, even if he doesn't know it. She put her tea down and stood up. Thank you. My pleasure, sharing tea with a fascinating stranger is one of life's true delights, he told her. No, thank you for what you said, she clarified. It helped me. She bent down and picked up her pack. I'm glad. Iroh told her. She started to walk away but stopped and turned around. Oh, and about your nephew, maybe you should tell him that you need him too, she suggested. Iroh said nothing as she walked away. He just drank his tea. Azula stared down Aang. Do you really want to fight me? She asked almost tauntingly. She was a highly skilled firebender who could hold her own while he looked like he would run at the first sign of trouble. Then the cry of an ostrich horse was heard. One came out of an alley and its rider hopped off. Yes, I really do, the rider said as he tossed his head away, revealing his face. Zuko, said Aang in surprise. The Avatar hadn't expected him to show up. I was wondering when you'd show up, Zuzu, Azula told her brother, crossing her arms. While she also hadn't expected him, she knew she could handle him. Aang snorted a laugh. Zuzu. It was a funny name. Back off, Azula, Zuko said, moving into his stance, having a hand directed at both of them. He's mine. I'm not going anywhere, she replied as she too went into her stance. The three of them faced off in the beginning of a three-way fight. Each of them stared down the other two, trying to figure out who would make the first move. Zuko looked at Azula and moved his eyes to look at Aang. As he did, he noticed that Azula gave a little smirk. She made the first move by throwing a blue fireball at Zuko. He reacted quickly by bending a shield of fire, but the blue fireball sent him crashing into a wood column. After staring at what happened, Aang opened his gilder and tried to fly away. Azula bent a large column of blue fire at him. He tried to block the fire by bending air through it. It worked, but he also fell back onto the ground. Looking up, he saw Azula running along a rooftop. She leapt down in front of him and bent fire in a sweeping motion with her foot. He leapt and landed between Zuko and Azula. This set off a three-way bending barrage of fire and air. They kept changing positions, sometimes it was Aang in the middle, sometimes it was Azula. It got confusing for them, but they all just kept attacking the other two. Finally, Aang leapt up a staircase and ran into a house. Azula followed him but immediately discovered that the room had no floor. Aang sat on an air scooter on the other side and gave a wave. She regained her balance and landed on the tiny space of flooring that was attached to the wall. Zuko, however, charged right in and crashed into the bottom floor. Aang looked down at him but remembered that Azula was still there. She bent a stream of fire at him, which he quickly dodged by running along the edges of the wall and out the door, knocking her down to the bottom floor as well. He leapt off the staircase to avoid a burst of fire and landed on the ground. As he stood up, he saw Zuko being sent out of the building via a burst of fire. He fell down unconscious on the ground as Azula exited the building. He leapt up between two walls to avoid her fire. Anticipating his next move, she bent a thin stream of fire to slice off the part of the roof he was on. He leapt to the rest of the roof, only to grab the edge. She sliced that part off as well as he tried to climb up. He got stuck under a large piece of lumber in the wreckage as Azula entered the room. She set the walls on fire and began to walk towards him as he was desperately trying to get the piece of lumber off. Before she could anything, Katara appeared. Bending her water into a water whip, she distracted Azula by bending the water whip into grabbing her hand. As Azula tried to regain her balance, Katara used the water whip to break the piece of lumber which had Aang stuck. Katara! He cried joyfully. Azula retaliated by whipping around and sending a stream of fire at Katara. She ran out of the building to avoid the fire and Azula gave chase. As she was about to pass another door, Sokka and Tenten appeared out of it. She dodged Sokka's club and leapt out of the way of Tenten's kunao, landing in the street where Niji was waiting. She dodged his strikes by jumping back, but then heard double dynamic entry. Turning around, she saw two different pairs of feet coming at her. She let that fly right over her by falling to the floor. While she fought with Aang, Sokka, Katara, and Team Guy, a shadow appeared over Zuko's body. Opening his eyes, he saw a familiar face. "Uncle," he said, surprised at Iroha's appearance. "Get up," Iroha ordered. And he did. Meanwhile, Azula was still fighting, but could never hit her targets. They kept moving and forcing her to go where they wanted her to go. They cornered her in front of an alley. She felt that something wasn't right and looked down at her feet. Suddenly they were somehow yanked from underneath her. Standing behind her, at the other end of the alley, was Toph. "I thought you guys could use a little help," she told Azula's opponents. "Thanks," Katara replied. Azula got back on her feet and moved away. She bent two bursts of flame at them and then ran through an alley. Thinking she had escaped them once she was through the alley, she didn't notice Iroh and Zuko until she ran into Iroh himself. Finally, the 10 of them cornered her in front of a ruined wall. "Well, look at this," she announced. "Enemies and traitors all working together, I'm done. I know when I'm beaten." She raised her hands in surrender. "You got me, a princess surrenders with honor." But before anyone could do anything, a massive wind came in from behind them, making them lose their balance for a quick minute. Once they regained their balance, they saw someone standing on top of the ruined wall that Azula stood in front of. Everybody's eyes widened in surprise. "Azula," Naruto growled. "I am not happy with you." "Naruto," Azula began. He interrupted her. "You and I will have a talk later. Right now, I have to deal with this." He looked down at the 10 people in front of Azula. "Zuko, Iroh, my fight is not with you. I recommend you leave," he told them. "We'll take that recommendation," Zuko said, surprising the others. But he knew that with the way Naruto was right now, if he gave the chance to leave, it was best to take it. As Zuko and Iroh began to leave, Azula spoke. "What's the matter, Zuzu? Lost your spine?" she asked him, trying to goad him back into a fight. He stiffened but refused to look back at his sister. Both he and Iroh walked away. Azula did not like being ignored, so she bent a fireball at her brother. Iroh saw the incoming fireball and pushed Zuko out of the way. The fireball hit him in the left shoulder, knocking him out cold. "Azula, stand down," Naruto ordered before she could do anything else. "Zuko, take him and go." Zuko did just that. He left the town, carrying his unconscious uncle. "Azula," the blonde began, "until I tell you, you are not to move from that spot or do any firebending. Is that clear?" "You can't," she tried to say. "Eyes. That clear?" he snarled. She knew better than to press her luck, so she nodded. "Good. Come on, guys. We can take him. He's just one guy and he's not even a bender," Toph told the others. Before anyone could say anything else, she felt someone grab her hair roughly and also felt a knife of some sort against her neck. "I'd changed that attitude of yours quickly, Missy," the blonde said into her ear as the others, minus Azula and Team Guy, looked at him in shock. To them, it had looked like he disappeared from atop the wall and reappeared behind the earthbender. "If you don't, it's liable to get you killed." He stepped away from her and walked past her. "We'll be leaving now," he told them, walking to Azula, taking her by the arm, and walked out of the ruined town. Once he was clear of the town, he hoisted Azula up onto his back and ran off at an incredible speed. The remaining people there went back to the nearby Appa and climbed aboard. They flew back to retrieve Akela and their supplies. Soon afterwards, in the night, Appa once again found a flat piece of a mountain. He didn't land. He just collapsed onto the ground and fell asleep. Aang, Sokka, Katara, Toph, Momo, Akela, and Team Guy just went to sleep in the saddle. It was the first full sleep they had ever since they first saw the tank train and they were grateful for it. When Mai and Ty Lee got back to the tank train, they decided to go after Azula. The tank train followed the trail of fur. They met up with Naruto and Azula, who had slowed down when he noticed the tank train, in a different part of the forest after dark. "Hey. Are you guys alright?" Ty Lee asked. "Not now, Ty Lee," Naruto told her as he marched Azula to the side of the tank train, making her stand against it. "What were you thinking?" he asked her. "What do you mean?" Azula asked back. "I mean your idea of going after the Avatar alone. I told you specifically to wake me when you caught up with him," he told her heatedly. "You said it yourself. The Avatar was weak. I would have captured him easily if his friends or Zuko hadn't shown up," she protested. "That's exactly my point. I wanted you to wake me up because of them. My main worry about them isn't the Avatar, it is Sokka. And why did you try to attack Zuko after I allowed him and Iroh to leave?" he demanded. That was something he had never taught her. "You did what?" Mai asked her with half shock, half surprise. She never would have thought that her friend would do something like that. He didn't get hit. That old fool of an uncle pushed him out of the way, Azula told her. She then felt a gust of wind go by her face rather violently. She turned to see Naruto's arm buried in the tank train. The tank train was made from Udeo metal, the finest metal in the bending countries, and Naruto punched through it like it was made from paper. Iroh pushed Zuko out of the way because he knew his answer. You were about to kill your brother and possibly ruin your answer just because he didn't respond to your insult. He growled. It was not a time for you to be petty, Azula. Your life was at stake. I was not in any danger. She protested. She would have been able to handle herself. Yes, you were. He roared at her. You went off on your own without telling me. How am I supposed to protect you if you don't tell me where you're going? Do you want to die? I asked that it? Were you trying to do something so stupid that will get you killed? No, she told him, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. I just wanted to show that I could handle it myself. I honestly thought I could take him, and I thought you really needed the rest. The next thing she knew, Naruto pulled her into a tight hug. Don't ever scare me like that again. Understand? Never again, he told her as he held her. She nodded against his chest. I'm sorry. It didn't hurt her pride much when she said it to him. He broke the hug. Thank you. He looked at all three of them. We should all get some rest. I'll take watch. The three girls nodded in agreement and quickly went into the tank train. That was nicely done, Kaki, the Kyuubi complimented. It was necessary, Kyuubi, he silently replied. She shouldn't have done something so reckless. You would have done the same thing 3 years ago, the fox pointed out to him. It was the truth and they both knew it. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago, he objected. I know the consequences of charging in without a thought. She didn't, and that's what she did today. She was overconfident and that would have gotten her killed. And while he hadn't been killed, he had lost a lot of soldiers for doing nearly the exact same thing, which was why he stopped. The two of them stayed silent for a couple of minutes. Why did you take watch, Kit? You know that neither the Avatar's group nor Zuko will come after you, the Kyuubi asked out of the blue. Someone should still keep an eye out, Naruto said quietly, now knowing that they were alone. You're trying to avoid the dreams, aren't you? Why am I even seeing the elemental countries in my dreams? I left that all behind me. Not all of it, a new voice told him. Turning his head, he saw someone standing in front of the tank train. Saifu, he greeted before looking around. You frozen us in a moment, didn't you? Everything had seemed to stop. Very observant, Saifu told him in a dry voice. Do you know what's causing my dreams? This was different from the other nightmares he had, and he knew it wasn't natural. Of course I do. I'm causing it. He froze. Out of all the possible answers he could have gotten, he hadn't expected that for an answer. Why? He asked, wanting a reason. I feel I must remind you of the consequences of your decision to leave the elemental countries. What are you saying? That the dream of the Yonbai being sealed was my fault. He couldn't see the sense or the reason of that. It sounded completely ridiculous. It wasn't a dream. When he heard that, he froze. You mean that actually happened? He asked, not wanting to believe it. Yes, the spirit answered simply. The Yonbai was sealed, and he blamed me. He felt your presence both when his Jinchuriki key was being captured and when he was being sealed. He thought you were actually there and did nothing to help. Even if I had been there, there was nothing I could do to help. He wouldn't have made it past the entire Akatsuki group. And yet, there was the chance that you could have stopped those two from taking him. This isn't my fault. He protested vehemently. For the love of Kami, he had been asleep when it happened. In a way, yes, it is. Which is why every time one of your remaining brethren is taken, you will see what happens, the spirit declared. Then the frozen moment ended, and he disappeared. Are you going to be okay, Kit? The Kyuubi asked. The fox was concerned, now knowing that there was a possibility that Naruto would get a different kind of nightmare whenever he slept. The blonde looked to the sky, watching the stars twinkle in the night. I just hoped that Gaara is still alive, he said, mostly to himself. There were now 2 other Jinchuriki still left alive, 3 if Gaara was indeed still alive. And he hoped that his friend from Suna was one of those 3. Location: Elemental Countries. The Akatsuki once more gathered in meeting. This time, they gathered in the same place. The day the Yonbai was sealed and the Gadamazo had spoken had put them on edge, so they decided for the time being to always meet in person. We have captured 6 of the 9 Biju, the leader announced. Which means there are only 3 more to find and capture, a hunchback member said. Well, let's go find them already. I'm getting bored here, announced a member with purple eyes. Haydn, shut up. You're annoying, an eerily green-eyed member told him. Make me, Kakuzu. Haydn challenged. There they go again, a long-haired member said. Enough, the leader spoke, his purple, rippled-like eyes stared at both Haydn and Kakuzu. We have new information about the Kyubi. That made everyone pay attention. Where is he? Itaki asked calmly. A month ago, one of our spies in Konoha informed us that a shinobi team had encountered the Kyubi in the Bending countries. After informing us, he was ordered to book passage to the country known as the Earth Kingdom. When was this? The hunchback member asked. A month ago. He left immediately for the Earth Kingdom. So why are we just learning about this now? Kakuzu asked. Our spy also learned of a seal in the mission records room that sends messages and people, if enough chakra is added, to far locations, like the Bending countries. Before he left, our spy carefully made a copy of the seal and stole copies of the receiving seal tag. He sent us these as he left. The reason we waited this long was for the spy to reach the Earth Kingdom. He looked at 2 members. Itake, Kisame, you will be the ones to go through the seal and retrieve the Kyubi. Why them? Yelled Haydn. I want to send that entire continent to Lord Jashin. The reason is because Itaki and Kisame have dealt with the Kyubi before. They are the most experienced in dealing with him. Anything we should know about the Bending countries? Itaki asked. They are currently in a war that has lasted for the past century. Do not attract attention to yourselves. Do we have any information on the target? Kisame asked. None that is new. I expect that the Kyubi will be different from what you remember, so I'd advise caution when dealing with him. Well, it'll still be interesting to see the kid again, he said with a grin. When do we leave? Itaki asked the leader. Immediately, he answered. Chapter 7, Training and Fighting. Location, Earth Kingdom. 2 days had passed since the fight in Tuzin. They had spent the night in a rock quarry. Now it was early morning and the only people who are supposed to be up that early is Team Guy. The reason the word supposed was used was because that Aang was also up and excited too. Today's the day. He said excitingly as he leapt into the air. He landed next to Sokka and Akela. Can you believe it? After all that time searching for a teacher, I'm finally starting earthbending. And this place, it's perfect. Don't you think? He looked down at the 2. Sokka, Akela. Both of them managed to throw him a glare at the same time. Oh, the 2 of you are still sleeping, huh? Too early for this, grumbled Sokka. Akela growled sleepily in agreement. Sorry, Aang whispered. Suddenly, the ground began to rumble and a nearby earth tent broke open. Good morning, earthbending student. Toph announced. Good morning, Saifu Toph, Aang greeted in return as she walked over to them. Hey, you never call me Saifu Katara, Katara said with a little bit of jealousy from where she sat in her sleeping bag. Don't take it personally, Katara, Niji told her. He had seen the same kind of look on academy students who had just technically graduated. He's just excited. Aang began to rub the back of his head. Well, if you think I should. He wanted to be polite to everyone, not rude. Sokka sat up, glared at the 2 of them and grumbled something at them. Sorry snoozles. We'll do our earthbending as quietly as we can, Toph told him before bending a rock to jut out of the ground beneath him, sending the bag skywards. It was probably not one of her better ideas. She was immediately pinned by Akela, who had his teeth at her throat. You know, Toph, for a supposed genius that was pretty stupid of you, Sokka told her as he stood above her. The sleeping bag fell down to the earth harmlessly as they all stared at the scene. What? How did you? She tried to ask. She thought that he was still in the bag when she sent it upward. You need to stop underestimating non-benders. He looked over at the wolf. Let her go, Akela. He did as he was instructed, releasing Toph from his jaws. You trained your senses and your body very well, Sokka. You are very youthful. Lee shouted out. He had seen what the tribesman had done and was impressed by what he saw. Focus, Lee. Barked out Guy. While Sokka is indeed youthful, we must get going. His student nodded in agreement and got serious again. Where are you guys going? Katara asked them. She had gotten out of her sleeping bag and was now standing up, looking at them. To get Naruto, Neji answered. He was ready to go and was just waiting for the rest of his team to be the same. Why? The last time that happened, he almost killed Hinata. She could still see the kunao in the Hyuga's stomach and the blue, swirling orb that inched closer and closer to her face. He is still our teammate and our friend. Lee stated. You do know that Naruto doesn't see it like that anymore, right? Sokka asked. It was obvious back in Omashu. But then he remembered that this shinobi team wasn't there. They still believed that Naruto would come back. It doesn't matter. Then how are you going to find him? I thought that Team Kurane was the tracking team. These guys looked like they were the fighting team. Lady Hinata has taught me some things on how to use the Byakugan with tracking, Neji told them. It had taken a while, but he managed to pick up a few things. Also, just because we aren't a tracking team doesn't mean we don't know a few things about tracking, Tenten stated. Despite how her sensei might act, he believed in a through education. As such, they had a basic understanding of many shinobi fields. Okay, what's your plan for tracking him? The tribesman asked them. We will head back to Tuzan and then track him from there, Guy told him. Now we must be off. Come, my youthful students. Let us track our wayward friend with the power of youth. The four of them took off in an impressive show of speed. After they left, Aang hopped over Toph. So what move are you going to teach me first? He asked excitedly. Rockalink? The Trembler? Oh, maybe I could learn how to make a whirlpool of land. He would have continued if his new teacher hadn't placed a hand in front of him. Let's start with Move a Rock, Toph told him before walking away. Sounds good, sounds good. He replied, giving her a clap. Akela gave a yawn and woofed something at the air nomad. If Kiba was there, the yawn and the woof would have translated to suck up. A couple of minutes later, Toph and Aang stood in front of two big rocks while everyone else watched from the sidelines. The key to earthbending is your stance. You've gotta be steady and strong, Toph explained as she showed an earthbending stance. Rock is a stubborn element. If you're going to move it, you've gotta be like a rock yourself. Like a rock, got it, Aang repeated. Good. Now the actual motion for this one is pretty simple. She took one step towards the rock and at the same time, punched the rock. The rock slid across the quarry until it hit one of the walls. Okay, you ready to give it a try? She asked him. He mimicked the stance he was shown. I'm ready. He tried to punch the rock but instead, he slid backwards until he crashed into a still sleeping Appa and fell to the ground. Rock beats airbender, Sokka stated drily. Akela nodded in agreement. A younger Iroh ran over a hill with a single tree. He had a smile on his face, for behind him was his son, Lu-Ten. I got you, Dad. He said happily, pretending he bent a fireball at his father. Iroh turned around and pretending to be hit, he fell to the ground. Lu-Ten jumped onto his stomach, the two of laughing happily. The sky then turned dark and began to rain. A much older Iroh knelt before a grave. My beloved Lu-Ten, he said. I will see you again. Just then, he heard a familiar voice say uncle. Opening his eyes, he saw Zuko looking at him with worry. Looking around he saw that he was in an abandoned shack. He tried to sit up but felt pain in his left shoulder. It's been some time since I've been to hit that close to the heart, he noted. Zuko looked away. I'm sorry about that. I should have seen that fireball coming, he apologized. He really should have seen it coming. Do not blame yourself, nephew. I chose to push you out of the way. I know. He reached for the tea that was brewed and poured some into a cup. I hope I made it the way you like it. He handed the cup to Iroh. He had tried to do it the right way, but he wasn't sure. The Dragon of the West brought the tea to his lips and drank. He made a face. His nephew had not done it the way it liked it, but was able to hide it quickly. Good, he told Zuko as he dared himself to take another sip. That was very, bracing. Zuko poured him another cup and gave it to his uncle. When he wasn't looking, Iroh threw the tea out the window behind him. So, uncle, he began. I've been thinking. It's only a matter of time before I run into Azula again. I'm going to need to know more advanced firebending if I want to stand a chance against her. I know what you're going to say, she's my sister and I should be trying to get along with her. Well yes, you should do that. But you do have a point. After a little struggling, Iroh managed to stand up. It's time to resume your training, he declared. Zuko looked a little more hopeful at those words. I don't understand what went wrong, Katara said, looking at Toph as Aang walked back to the rock. He did it exactly the way you did it. Maybe there's another way, Aang offered. He approached the rock in an airbending stance. What if I came at the boulder from a different angle? That should solve the problem, right? Toph grabbed the back of his shirt. No, that's the problem. You've got to stop thinking like an airbender. There's no different angle, no clever solution, no trick that's going to move that rock. She shoved him out of the way. You've got to face it head on. And when I say head on, I mean like this. She leapt at the rock and shattered it by simply head-butting it. Whoa! Aang said in surprise. As he tried to come to terms with what he just heard, Katara decided to try and help by going after Toph, who had walked away. I've been training Aang for a while now, she said once she got up to the earthbender. He really responds well to a positive teaching experience. Lots of encouragement and praise, kind words, she clarified. If he's doing something wrong, perhaps a gentle nudge in the right direction. Thanks, Katara, Toph replied. A gentle nudge, I'll try that. By the time Team Guy returned to Tuzin, they still noticed the lack of activity there, having been long abandoned due to the iron mines running out of ores to harvest. Lee could see a large mountain range overlooking the abandoned town, which he and his team later learned from a wandering cabbage merchant the name of the mountain range. The cabbage merchant also revealed that he was going over the Zishan Mountains and into the border with Xiashu province of the Earth Kingdom. After another half-hour of conversation between Team Guy and the cabbage merchant, he soon went off in his direction, leaving them alone with crucial information. We got lucky, thanks to that cabbage merchant, Tenten announced. The tracks were made on hard ground, not sand. Plus, the wind hasn't been blowing hard around here. She was checking the footprints by the town entrance. Indeed, we also know which way Naruto went. Lee said as he came back into the town. He seemed excited about something. What do you mean? Naruto made the same kind of footprint both Guy-sensei and I make when we run laps around the village. I don't think he knew about the footprints, and if he did, he was probably hoping that they would be blown over by the wind, he quickly explained. Niji, confirm. Guy ordered. Niji nodded and activated his Byakugan to look in the direction of the tracks. It's very faint, but I can sense Naruto's chakra signal in that direction, he said after looking around for a couple of minutes. I thought Hinata said you wouldn't be able to see Naruto's chakra unless he used a jutsu, Tenten said. No offense to Lady Hinata, but I am better in using the Byakugan, he replied, boasting slightly. Naruto's control is still incredible though. That's why his chakra signal is faint to me. Nevertheless, we have found his trail. Guy announced loudly. Now we will go forward with the power of youth. While not all the team agreed with how he said it, they all agreed on what he meant. Sure enough, they were following the trail at full speed, which in Team Guy means that both Niji and Tenten can easily stay with Guy and Lee. You see, in that team, full speed is directly below youthful speed. I'm bored. Mai stated as she lay on the ground outside the tank train, looking up at the sky. You're always bored, Mai, Ty Lee told her, lying on the ground beside her. Well, now I'm really bored. Mai, please give it a rest. Just think of this as a break, Azula told her. The three girls hadn't been able to do much for the past 2 days. After spending a day fixing the hole Naruto made in the tank train, the engineers found that they needed more wood as fuel for the fire. That meant another day for finding wood in the nearby forest. Today was the day they were supposed to move again. The engineers just needed a little more time to get the wood down to proper size. Meanwhile the girls had sparred, ran, relaxed, and basically did anything that kept them from getting bored. Hey, where's Naruto? Ty Lee asked out of the blue. Yeah, where is he? Mai asked as well, genuinely curious. Now that you mention it, I haven't seen him for the past 2 days, Azula said before shrugging her shoulders. Well, if he had to do something and wanted to be left alone, we should respect his wishes. You're sure acting nonchalant about him, considering you like him. What? The princess of the Fire Nation would like to say that she didn't squeak, but she did. I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm the Avatar, she replied in deadpan. Come on, it's so obvious, Azula. You like him, Ty Lee said with a smirk. It wasn't often that they could Azula flustered like this. Did that small crush you had on him grow when we weren't looking? Azula blushed a little bit. Well, I don't know. I haven't been sure since Udeo. That had left some doubts in her mind. You mean that fiasco with Cory? Mai asked. She nodded. She told me what he had told her. He said that a crush can turn to love if you realize that your crush has imperfections. Right now, I don't think that Naruto has any imperfections. She tried to think of some but couldn't. If he had any, he kept them well hidden. Oh, I know an imperfection. Ty Lee said. He's always polite and serious but also cheerful. Ty Lee, that's not an imperfection, Mai told her. However, I do know an imperfection that he has. That got everyone's attention. What's that? Azula asked. He's secretive. He's never told us about his past or who those people with the Avatar are to him. Yeah, you're right. Also, he didn't really tell us about the people we saw in the swamp, just that they're dead, Ty Lee pointed out. It was something that vaguely annoyed her, because it was not a major issue that she had to deal with. What's he hiding from us? It was a question they all wanted to have answered but knew that it wouldn't come from him, at least, not voluntarily. I don't know. The acrobat had a frown on her face for a brief moment, and then brightened up. But what I do know is that you do like him, Azula, she told the Fire Nation princess. And how can you tell? She asked with sarcasm in her voice. Silently, she didn't want the conversation to continue. But she also knew that nothing short of an act from the spirits would make Ty Lee stop now. Because there are days where the two of you act like a couple, she answered. You argue and fight, but you also work well together in and out of combat. She's got a point, Mai noted. They had seen it so many times, it didn't surprise them anymore. Also, we're pretty sure that Naruto likes you as well. What? What do you mean? Azula asked, surprised. She didn't think that the blonde had thought of her like that. We're quite confident in the fact that Naruto wouldn't let any girl sleep with her head on his naked chest, she said with a dry smirk. Her blush, which she had been trying to get rid of, got redder. You saw that? Mai now had a little smirk on her face. It's not every day the princess of the Fire Nation got flustered. We walked in on you guys the next morning. I decided that the both of us would leave you two alone. Ty Lee kept grousing about the fact that neither of us were good artists. If you had made any pictures, I would have burned them. She hissed at Ty Lee. Then it's a good thing we didn't make any, the acrobat replied easily enough. There is another thing that tells us Naruto likes you. What's that? He yelled at you for putting yourself in danger. I don't think I ever seen someone act that protective with you. Before Azula could reply, there was a sudden wind coming from the nearby forest as well as the sound of something to cut the air. What was that? Ty Lee asked, lifting her head up and looking around. I don't know, but let's go check it out, Azula said as she leapt off the ground and charged into the forest. Secretly, she was glad the conversation was over with. Naruto looked around and saw all the scarred tree trunks. Okay, need to work on size, he noted. Look on the bright side, you finally managed to get the thing working, the Kyuubi said to him. Yeah, and I almost fell over because the thing was too big and heavy. Just look at all the trees. They all looked like a fierce battle just taken place and they received the blunt of it. And that was just from the one jutsu he was trying to create. True. I still think that using a cage bunshin would help. It certainly helped in the past, why couldn't it do the same in the present? For training, yes, the blonde agreed. But it would be a crutch in battle. I want to be able to use this thing on my own. Not every enemy he faced would give him the precious seconds he needed to create it. You said the same thing when you started to practice using the Raise-Non with only one hand, the fox commented. That had been a long 2 months, especially since those months were during a siege. And I was right, he replied. Still, it needs work. The thing only lasts a few seconds and I want to be able to throw it. He still had to figure out how to do that. That was when Azula, Ty Lee, and Mai appeared behind him. Is everything okay, Naruto? Azula asked him. She was concerned because she saw the trees surrounding them. But she didn't see any enemies. Yes, everything is fine, he said, trying to assure them. I was working on something and it turned out to be a little bigger than expected. He turned around to look at them. What he saw made him stop and give them a once-over. Sunning ourselves, were we? They looked down and then realized that they went to check on the disturbance in their undergarments, giving him quite the show. Pervert! Cried Ty Lee. She tried to him, but with no success. Nothing of the sort, Ty Lee, he replied as he dodged the strikes. I'm just stating the obvious. Calm down, Mai told a blushing Ty Lee, holding her back. Do you enjoy the view, Naruto? Azula asked her bodyguard with a smirk. She didn't normally do something like this, she was a princess, damn it. She had her pride, but she took a pose for him. He looked at her and then looked at her. Let me put it this way, I'm glad the three of you know how to defend yourselves. Why's that? If you ever did something like this back home, you would have a lot of guys coming after you, he told them. It was the truth. He wasn't making any of it up. They were all quite beautiful, all three of them. And yet, his attention was on his princess. Kit, we've got incoming, the Kyuubi said suddenly, getting his attention. What is it? He silently asked, becoming alert. Whenever the fox said something like that, it was best to pay attention. It's faint, but I think it's the shinobi team that's currently with the airbender brat. You know that weird guy who keeps going on about youth. It was hard not to notice that guy whenever he was around. When he heard that, his eyes went flat. Azula, are the engineers almost done with the wood? He asked the princess. They only need another half hour to be done, she told him, not sure as to why he wanted to know that. When they're done, have them set off immediately. As for you three, please get dressed and join them when they leave, he ordered. She was immediately suspicious. What's going on, Naruto? He looked away. I'm going to get company soon and I don't want you three to be around when they get here, he said shortly. But they understood what he wasn't trying to say. Is it that group of people from Omashu? Ty Lee asked, deciding to be the one to break the silence that had momentarily fallen around them. He shook his head. It's a different one. It's that group that was with the Avatar at Tuzin, isn't it? Azula asked. He nodded once. We're staying, she stated, the other two nodding in agreement. No, you're not. When the tank train leaves, you will be on it. His voice was firm. He wasn't going to budge on this. We can take them. Ty Lee declared. She was certain of it. A couple of strikes from her and they would be down for the count. He looked at her. Ty Lee, I know that you and Mai were about to fight two of them when the Sky Bison sent you into the water. Be glad that it did that. You would have lost in seconds. When this team fights seriously, they tend to rearrange the surrounding landscape. You are leaving in the tank train, no arguments. Azula was about to argue again, but then she saw the look in his eyes. They held the seriousness of a soldier about to go into battle. At that point, she knew it was pointless to argue. Very well, she agreed. Just promise me one thing. What's that? He asked. Promise me that you'll win. He smiled. You doubt my ability to win a fight? He asked with a hurt voice they all knew was faked. But they left anyway, leaving Naruto alone in the clearing. Keep your knees high, twinkle toes. Toph roared at her student. Aang currently holding a big boulder on his back and was trying to walk. Every time he made a step, Toph would bend the earth beneath his foot to rise a little bit. After 2 steps, the weight of the boulder sent him off to the side and into the ground. Next, she stood in front of a flat piece of stone. Rubbing her hands, she dug through the rock like it was sand. He tried to repeat her actions, only to hurt his hand at the first attempt. After that, he stood in a stance and waited. The waiting was causing him to sweat. Suddenly, Toph came out of the rock to his right and shouted rock-like at him. He yelped and fell backwards to the ground. She simply bent the earth underneath him to stand him up again and flicked his forehead. After borrowing Sokka's club, she would have just taken it, but the fact that Akela was there and growling lightly convinced her to change her mind. She handed it over to a blindfolded Aang. She then had him play the earth-bending version of Whack-A-Mole. He kept missing at first but finally managed to hit one, earning him a slight nod of approval from Toph. Next, she bent the earth to raise a wall on both sides of them. Then she drew a line in the ground and bent the surrounding rock into armor, covering her from head to toe, save for her eyes, which is kinda redundant. She charged straight at Aang. He grabbed hold of her when she crashed into him and began to push her back. After some struggling, he managed to push her back across the line. She then had him stand on what can only be described as 2 earthen stilts while tossing and catching a weight. She moved between the 2 stilts and punched them, sending a shockwave up both of them. Aang didn't move, so the shockwave just blew through him and his clothes. She gave him a single nod of approval, making him smile. Sokka stood in a tree, watching as a small furry creature came by and ate a patch of grass. You're awfully cute, he said. But unfortunately for you, you're made of meat. He kept watching the creature. Just a bit closer, he muttered. When the creature finally left the grass and came near the tree, he acted. Yelling a battle cry, he leapt down with machete in hand, ready to kill the creature. Unfortunately for him, he landed on top of a crevice. He got buried up to his waist. The creature simply walked up closer to him. Gotcha! He cried, about to swing his machete again. This caused him to be buried even further, but he managed to spread his arms out. The result was him buried up to his armpits, allowing him to move his arms freely. He tried to move his body out of the crevice but with no success. You are one lucky little meat creature, he told said creature, which only wagged its tail in response. He was glad Akela had stayed behind to take a nap on Appa. The wolf would have been rolling around on the ground in wolfish laughter. Lightning is a pure expression of fire bending, without aggression, Iroh told Zuko. It's not fueled by rage or emotion the way other fire bending is. He reached for the new batch of brewed tea. Some call lightning the cold-blooded fire. It is precise and deadly, like Azula. Or Naruto, Zuko replied. He could still remember that night on Ember Island. True, Iroh agreed. To perform the technique requires peace of mind. I see, that's we're drinking tea, to calm the mind. It made a little sense to him. He briefly wondered if that had to do with the fact he spent 3 years with his uncle. Oh yeah, good point, Iroh said. He was drinking the tea because he was a tea enthusiast. I mean, yes. After they had finished the tea, they left the shack and walked over to the nearby cliff edge. If either of them looked out to the distance, they would have seen a familiar ruined town. There is energy all around us, Iroh began. The energy is both yin and yang, positive energy and negative energy. Only a select few firebenders can separate these energies. This creates an imbalance. The energy wants to restore balance and, in the moment, the positive and the negative energy come crashing back together. You provide release and guidance, creating lightning. He motioned Zuko to step back. When he was sure he had enough room, he began to move his arms in a circular motion, already generating lightning. Once he was done, he shot his right hand, which was folded save for 2 fingers, forward, and the lightning that was stored was fired off into the air. "I'm ready to try it," Zuko stated after he watched the display. "Remember, once you've separated the energy, you do not command it. You are simply its humble guide," Iroh warned him, idly rubbing his left shoulder. "Breathe first." He did indeed breathe and began to copy Iroh's motions. The first thing that Iroh noticed was wrong was the fact that his fingers were not generating lightning. When he shot his fingers out, he didn't generate lightning. It just exploded in front of his face, sending him crashing into the ground. Naruto had sat down against one of the tree trunks in the clearing. It had been an hour and a half since the tank train had left with the girls in it. He waited in anticipation, wondering as to how he would fare against Team Guy, as opposed to how he and Azula's group managed to fight Team Kurane to a standstill in Omashu. "They're here," the Kyuubi said. Even though the surrounding area was quiet, the fox knew they weren't alone. "I know," Naruto silently replied, having noticed that he had guests. He looked out to the clearing. "You might as well come out." "I know you're there," he called out. The echo of his voice seemed to reverberate around the trees, becoming fainter each time it was heard. The forest was silent after the echo disappeared, but the people who were looking for him landed into the clearing. They stared at each other silently for a few minutes. "You took your time getting here," the blonde finally said. "Come quietly, Naruto," Guy told him, his tone unusually serious. "You're surrounded and you have no backup." He barked out a laugh. "From let's go home to come quietly," he said, mostly to himself. "Next thing I know, Team Asuma is just going to try and blindside me." "When did you find about Team Asuma being here?" Lee asked. "Just now, thanks," he replied with an amused smirk. The Konoha shinobi had the decency to look ashamed. He had just unintentionally revealed a piece of information that the blonde shouldn't have heard. "Where are the girls, Naruto?" Neji asked him. The Hyuga had activated his Byakugan momentarily before arriving and only saw the blonde there. It made him wonder where the women he was supposed to be with were. "Whenever they go, you are usually with them. Isn't that the case? I'm starting to understand their patterns now." "They left. This isn't their fight." "Have you told them? Do they know about your past?" "No, and if I had my way about it, they never will." "That is most unyouthful of you, Naruto. Hiding your past from a girl, have you no shame?" Lee demanded. "Shut up, Lee," he curtly ordered. "It's my past and it's my choice to tell them or not." "Naruto," Tenten said. "We know all about the Kyuubi. You don't have to hide it anymore." Silence fell all around them as her words echoed momentarily in the air. "Tsunade told you, didn't she?" he asked after a few moments, finally breaking the silence. It made sense to him. Only the Hokage would do something like that, telling the others about what he held. Neji nodded. "And showed us the results of it too," he said. Those words brought back a memory of what he saw, making him silently will it to vanish. He still had nightmares about what he read, and in some nightmares, he appeared in place of Naruto, as the Jinchuriki that was targeted for abuse, despite his possession of the Byakugan. "Let's cut to the chase, shall we?" the blonde asked as he walked forward, away from the trunk of the tree. "The 4 of you want me to come back. I'm not going anywhere. So that leaves us with only one option." He brought his hands up into a familiar hand seal. "Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." They all heard a poof. Beside Naruto was not 10, 100, or even 1,000 clones, there was just one. "We fight," the clone said. The 2 of them then got into different stances. The original went into a high water bending stance while the clone went into a low fire bending stance. "Naruto, please," begged Tenten. "We don't want to fight you." Even though he had made a clone, he was still outnumbered and outmatched. They just wanted to resolve this peacefully. He snorted in derision. "Don't lie to me. I know you want to fight me." Lee decided to begin the attack by charging forward, hoping to catch the 2 blondes off guard. Konoha Senpua, Leaf Whirlwind. He cried as he leapt at his opponents. As the leg reached the two, the Naruto in the water-bending stance pressed both palms against the underside of the leg. Pushing upwards, he sent Lee into an unexpected flip. As Lee began to face the ground, the blonde put his palms on his back and guided him towards the clone. The clone reacted quickly to the incoming target. He shoved an elbow into Lee's chest and then punched him hard in the stomach with his other fist. He brought his body into a turn and snap-kicked Lee in the chest, sending him flying back to his teammates. Lee. Are you alright? Guy asked with concern as he caught his student. I am fine, Lee told his sensei, putting his feet back on the ground. He turned to glare at Naruto. What kind of style was that? It looked like both water-bending and fire-bending, Neji asked. While he didn't have a lot to go with, he had also never seen the two opposite elements work in tandem like that before. While I was being trained in the bending stances, I began to experiment in secret with a clone to see how two styles that the opposites of each other were could be used in tandem. What you just saw was the result of that experiment. You may have two shinobi skilled in the Goken, strong fist, and a shinobi skilled in the Juken, gentle fist. But this. He and his clone switched styles, just to prove his point. This is my own style, the Tsuinkan, twin fist, dot. Stop this, Naruto, Guy pleaded. We don't have to fight. That's bullshit, Guy. You commanded me to come quietly, and that sounded like an order. Naruto told him. And we both know it. Both he and the clone charged at Team Guy. Having no other choice, they retaliated. This time we're going to try something a little different, Toph told her student, walking past him. Instead of moving a rock, you're going to stop a rock. Get in your horse stance. She ordered. Aang did as he was told. I'm going to roll that boulder down at you, Toph pointed to said boulder. It was on top of a nearby cliff, sitting in front of a ramp. If you have the attitude of an earthbender, you'll stand your stance and stop the rock. Like this. She showed him the motion of the stance. Katara decided to intervene, trying to be helpful. Sorry, Toph, but are you sure this is really the best way to teach Aang earthbending? She asked. I'm glad you said something. Actually, there is a better way. The earthbender reached down for Aang's belt and took it off. She then warped it around his eyes. This way, you'll really have to sense the vibrations of the boulder to stop it. Thank you, Katara, she told the waterbender. Yeah, thanks, Katara, Aang repeated childishly. She could only chuckle awkwardly in return. Toph had climbed up to where the boulder was. With a simple push, she sent it down the ramp and at Aang. Katara waited nervously nearby while Aang faced the oncoming boulder. Just as the boulder and Aang were about to hit each other, he chickened out and jumped over the boulder. The thing just kept on rolling until it smashed into a cliff wall. He took the blindfold off and the first he saw was a very mad Toph. I guess I just panicked, he tried to defend himself. I don't know what to say. There's nothing to say. Toph told him angrily. You blew it. You had a perfect stance and perfect form. But when it came right down to it, you didn't have the guts. She shoved him to the ground. I know, I'm sorry, he told her, not trying to stand up. Yeah, you are sorry. She shoved her face into his. If you're not tough enough to stop the rock, then you could at least give it the pleasure of smushing you instead of jumping out of the way like a jellied bone wimp. Now, do you have what it takes to face that rock like an earthbender? She demanded. Instead of rousing his spirits and or his resolve, her little speech had the opposite effect. No. I don't think I do, he admitted in a defeated voice. It was just too difficult to understand. Katara once again decided to intervene. Aang, it's no big deal. You'll take a break and try earthbending again when you're ready. Besides, you still have a lot of waterbending to work on. Okay. She asked him, trying to be upbeat. Yeah, that sounds good. He got up and followed Katara. Yeah, whatever, Toph told the two of them. Go splash around until you feel better. She walked away as well. But she hadn't given up yet. She was going to teach Aang earthbending whether he liked it or not. Zuko kept trying to generate lightning, but the end results kept blowing up. Why can't I do it? He asked his uncle, angry with himself. Instead of lightning, it keeps exploding in my face, like everything always does. Iroh got up from where he sat. I was afraid this might happen. You will not be able to master lightning until you dealt with the turmoil inside you. He turned to face his uncle. What turmoil? He demanded. It didn't sound like it to him, but he wanted an answer. Zuko, you must let go of your feelings of shame if you want your anger to go away. But I don't feel any shame at all. I'm as proud as ever, he objected. Prince Zuko, pride is not the opposite of shame, but its source. True humility is the only antidote to shame. Well, my life has been nothing but humbling lately, the exiled prince admitted. Not only was he exiled from the Fire Nation, but he was also on the run from them as well. Iroh looked away for a moment and thought. I have another idea. I will teach you a fire-bending move that even Azula doesn't know, because I made it up myself. His nephew looked back at him and gave an appreciative smile. You probably think I deserve this, don't you? Sokka asked the small creature, who was currently sitting on his head. In response, it looked down at him. Look, I'm sorry I hunted you, but that's just the natural order of things. Big things eat smaller things, nothing personal. But this time it didn't work out that way. The creature yawned and turned around a couple of times before sitting down again and rubbed his nose. I admit it, you're cute, Sokka told the creature. Okay, you convinced me. If I get out of this alive, it's a karmically correct, vegetarian existence for me. No meat. He paused for a second as he realized just what he had uttered. Even though meat is so tasty, his eyes grew watery about the subject. The creature leapt off his head and ran off. A fly flew nearby, but Sokka swatted at it, making it go away. He found that the most comfortable way to put his arms was to cross them and put them on the ground in front of him. The creature came back with an apple in its mouth. Hey, looks like my karma's already paying off, Sokka said as the creature dropped the apple and pushed it forward with its nose. That's okay, I got it. He simply reached for his boomerang and used it to scoop up the apple. See? The boomerang does come back. He began to munch on the apple. The battle kept going on. Despite being outnumbered and his refusal to add more numbers to his side via clones, Naruto and the one clone he did have fought Team Guy on even ground. After foiling Lee's and Guy's double attack, he fended off Neji. Tenten all the while was staying in the back, throwing weapons at him in the hopes that he would be distracted. While she didn't pin him down, she did manage to take care of the clone. Now Team Guy stood across from him, all of them lightly panting. You have improved, Naruto, Guy told him as he and Lee stood in Naruto's view of Tenten. You would have made a fine Konoha shinobi. I was a fine Konoha shinobi, he replied. Everybody else was too busy sucking up to the Uchiha to notice. Nobody cared about him. They just went right to Sasuke when talking about his team. That's not true. Lee objected. Not everyone did that. So, you're admitting that people did it? He faltered. Well, while I admit that Toke, Ayam, Iruka-sensei, Jiji, and a few others didn't do it, everybody else pretty much did. Even you, Lee, the blonde said in accusation. I most certainly did not. The Konoha shinobi objected. You most certainly did. Do you remember the first time we met? It was during the Chunin exams. You met us and the first thing you demanded of us was to fight the Uchiha and only the Uchiha. You didn't even acknowledge me as a threat. It had been something that irked him when they first fought. Ironically enough, it vanished when he watched Sasuke get beaten. But he does acknowledge you as a threat now. That's why we're fighting, Neji said. Then he smirked. Although, I had to say that the fight is over. Behind Naruto, in the trees, Tenten held a katana in her hands and launched herself at the blonde. She swung at his side, hoping to injure him so that Neji could get in close and paralyze him. Or so she thought. What the? She thought in surprise as a loud clang filled the air in the clearing. Naruto had blocked her strike with his Jian. It was almost like he was expecting it. How did you? Did you honestly think that you got the clone? He asked in a bored tone. Of course, I did. She thought. She had taken the clone out with a kunai to the heart and to the head. You thought that you had taken the clone out by piercing its heart and head with kunai, correct? He asked her again, with the same bored tone. What? How did? She narrowed her eyes as she realized the truth. It was a genjutsu. She growled. He smiled. A minor one, designed to fool you into believing what you wanted to see happen to actually occur. You can use genjutsu as now? Lee asked in surprise. As far as he could remember, the blonde couldn't grasp the concepts of genjutsu. This was something they had not expected. I know a few, he said in answer. Then how do you explain the smoke? Tenten demanded. If she hadn't gotten the clone, why had it been covered in smoke before disappearing? Shinobi Tools 101, he answered shortly, like it was the most obvious thing. They were all confused by those words. Then Niji remembered his days in the academy and the lessons he learned. The clone used a smoke bomb, he said in realization. Suddenly, it all made sense. Correct, Naruto said in agreement. Just because I haven't been in the elemental countries for 3 years, doesn't mean I don't know how to make a smoke bomb. They were always useful for pranks when I was younger. So how did you know what I was going to do? Tenten asked him. How did you know that I was behind you when you didn't look behind you? Once again, he smiled and tapped his head with his free hand. The clone told me. While 3 members of Team Guy looked confused, one got the point. You know the secret of the cage bunshin? Guy asked, surprised by the fact. He never would have thought that Naruto would discover it on his own. The blonde nodded. I give credit to my teacher, he said, mystifying them. You flatter me, Kit, the fox told him. Is it flattery if it's true? He silently asked back. Yes, and it makes it even sweeter. So that was his plan, Guy realized. He used the genjutsu and the smoke bomb to allow the clone to disappear into the trees. When the clone saw what Tenten was about to do, he dismissed himself so that the original could get his memories. It was a good plan. He was willing to admit that. Tell me saw something, Tenten, Naruto asked, bringing everybody's attention back to what was going on. Are you any good with that katana? He looked at the weapon in her hands. She gave a little snort of disbelief. I am a master of weapons. It was an insult to her for him to even think she wasn't. I didn't ask if you were a master of weapons. I asked you if you were any good with the katana. There was a difference, he knew that much. What do you think? His answer was to simply swat the katana away and smacked her side with the flat side of his jian. Not very, apparently, he stated as she yelped in pain. Why you? She swung the katana at him again. He twisted to the side to dodge it and slapped her on the ass with the flat side of his jian. She kept trying and trying to hit him with the katana, but he had moved into an airbending stance and thus was always moving. Every time she tried to hit him, he'd twist or turn out of the way and then would hit her with the flat side of his jian. She was soon getting bruises everywhere and was also getting angrier. Will you stop that? She yelled at him as she attacked him again with the katana. Why should I? He asked in return as he blocked the strike. It's very entertaining. Tenten called out Niji. Break off high back. It was a term that Team Guy used when in a combat situation. To break off high back meant the person who was currently fighting the opponent would jump away in a high back flip. Meanwhile the rest of the team would send a barrage of kunai and shuriken at the opponent. While they were distracted by this, the airborne person would land and engage again, taking care of the distracted opponent. She broke contact with her katana and went airborne with a high back flip. Then he saw the oncoming barrage. But he did something that Team Guy wasn't expecting. He knelt down on one knee with his head bowed low. This way, the barrage of kunai and shuriken passed harmlessly over his head. Then a voice from the woods called out. Futon, de Tapa, wind style, great breakthrough. A huge gust of wind flew out of the woods. Not only did it stop the barrage, it redirected it back at the throwers. Team Guy leapt out of the way of the incoming barrage. When it had passed, Naruto had stood back up like nothing had happened. What? How? Lee tried to ask but was unable to form the question. Did you really think I wouldn't be able to learn new ninjutsu while I was here? Naruto asked the team, amused by their reactions. Before they could answer, another voice spoke up. And did you really think I wouldn't learn what my elemental affinity is? A person walked out of the woods, revealing himself as another Naruto. Guy then realized his mistake. The clone didn't just dismiss himself, he made a second clone. He thought silently. How do you know what your elemental affinity is? Niji asked in stunned surprise. Or even an elemental jutsu. That was something they hadn't learned until they were Chunin. Once again, I give credit to where credit is due, Naruto told them. The clone moved into an earthbending stance while the original went into an airbending stance while also keeping his Jian out. Weren't we in the middle of something? While Momo was trying to catch a frog, and failing, Katara and Aang stood in a marsh moving a small blob of water in a circle between the two of them. You know this block you're having is only temporary, right? Katara asked Aang. I don't want to talk about it. He replied. You do realize that's the problem, don't you? If you face this issue instead of avoiding it, she tried to tell him. I know. I get it, all right. He cut her off, letting the blob of water fall down into the pool they were in. I need to face it head on like a rock, but I just can't do it. I don't know why I can't, but I can't. Aang, if fire and water are opposites, then what's the opposite of air? She asked him, trying to help him out. I guess it is earth. It was the only element that she hadn't spoken of. That's why it's so hard for you to get this. You're working with your natural opposite, but you'll figure it out. I know you will. She reached behind her back and plucked out a reed. Think fast. She threw the reed at him. Aang reacted quickly, bending the water to slice the reed in half. Excellent, you have the reflexes of a waterbending master. Thanks, Katara. He then bowed to her. Saifu Katara. She gave a small smile and returned the bow. Fire is the element of power, Iroh lectured Zuko, drawing the symbol for fire in the dirt with a stick. The people of the Fire Nation have desire and will and the energy and drive to achieve what they want. He drew the symbol for Earth. Earth is the element of substance. The people of the Earth Kingdom are diverse and strong. They are persistent and enduring. He began to draw the symbol for air. Air is the element of freedom. The air nomads detached themselves from worldly concerns and found peace and freedom. Also, they apparently had pretty good senses of humor. He grinned at his nephew. Zuko just stared at him, so he continued, drawing the symbol for water. Water is the element of change. The people of the water tribe can adapt to many things. They have a deep sense of community and love that holds them together through anything. Why are you telling me these things? Zuko finally asked his uncle. He wasn't seeing the point. It is important to draw wisdom from many different places, he explained. If we take it from only one place, it becomes rigid and stale. To emphasize his point, he drew lines, separating the four elements. Understanding others, the other elements and the other nations, will help you become whole. He drew a circle around the elements, making them all whole. All this four elements talk is sounding like Avatar stuff, his nephew commented. It is the combination of the four elements in one person that makes the Avatar so powerful. He pointed the stick at Zuko's chest. But it can make you more powerful too. You see, the technique I am about to teach you is one I learned from studying the waterbenders. Zuko looked slightly hopeful. Aang sat on a big rock, trying to meditate. As he did, Toph came over and sat down nearby. Aang, I found these nuts in your bag, she told him, holding up a bag with a little Aang face on it. I figured you wouldn't mind, and besides, if you did, you're too much of a pushover to do anything about it. As a matter of fact, I don't mind. I'm happy to share anything I have, he told her in an even tone. You know, I'm really glad you feel that way. Because I also have this great new nutcracker. She picked up and twirled Aang's glider staff. Aang turned around with a look of unease as she brought the staff down on the nut, cracking the shell open. Actually, I prefer if you didn't crack. That's an antique, handcrafted by the monks, crack. It's a delicate instrument. She would break it if she kept doing that. It's not the only delicate instrument around here, Toph said mockingly as she and Momo ate the nuts. She walked away, banging the staff against rocks along the way. She was trying to get him mad, to come after her and take the staff back. Instead, he just went back to his meditation. But moments after she left, Katara came by. "Hey Aang, have you seen? Meditating here?" He cut her off. "It's important," the waterbender assured him. "It's almost sundown and Sokka isn't back yet. I think we should search for him." He turned to face her. That was troubling. Sokka was never one to disappear on them for long. "We'll find him faster if we split up." He got off the rock and the two of them went in two different directions. They had fought for hours. While Team Guy had enough numbers to keep Naruto occupied while the others caught their breath, Naruto had his stamina and his style. He had them guessing by switching the styles that he and the clone were using when they didn't expect it. He had lost count of the number of times he had moved into a fire-bending, air-bending, earth-bending or water-bending stance while fighting them. He also kept them on their toes by sometimes using ninjutsu at them, though he could only use wind-style jutsu. As a result, they had pretty much torn up the surrounding woods. But he was also getting tried himself, plus his Jian had been destroyed at some time during the fight. Now once again, Team Guy stood across from him. "Well, thank you for the exercise. But I'm afraid I must be going," he suddenly announced, surprising them. He dismissed the clone and began to walk away. "Don't turn your back on us, Naruto." Guy yelled at him. "You're not going anywhere." "Why not?" he asked as he walked away. He was putting a show of bravado, trying to make it look like he had just gotten bored instead of getting tried. "If you do, we will come after you," the leader of Team Guy told him. "We will follow you and we will take the girls hostage." He stopped but he kept his back to them. "And what would you do with them?" Neji smiled to himself. "We have him," he thought. "We'll take them hostage and if you don't come with us, we will kill them." "It is unyouthful, but we will do it," Lee said. If he was younger and less experienced, he might have objected to the idea. But he wasn't. "You could do that," Naruto acknowledged, finally turning around to them. But there was a smirk on his face. "But then that would mean the failure of your mission and the Fire Nation's victory in the war. I think Azula wouldn't care if you killed her if that was the outcome." "What do you mean?" Tenten asked with suspicion. "It's simple. You take me hostage or kill the girls, the Avatar and his friends die." "How would?" Neji began to ask. Then he understood. "You've had a clone tracking us since Tuzin. It seemed like the thing the blonde would do. Then all we'd have to do is knock you unconscious when we take you with us," Lee said. "If they did that, the clone wouldn't know to kill Aang and the others." "Wouldn't work," Naruto replied, pointing at the woods behind him. "Did you think the first clone only made one other clone?" he asked them. "There's a second clone." Guy silently realized. "He's watching us right now. The minute we take Naruto hostage, he'll dismiss himself and that will let the other clone know what will happen, allowing him to kill everybody back at the rock quarry. I am leaving now. You can try and follow me to take the girls. But I know where the Avatar is at this moment. I could put you on a false trail that would lead you nowhere near the girls. So, goodbye." He walked away. When he was about to disappear from their view, he stopped again. "By the way, you'll have until dark." "What?" shouted Lee. "What do you mean?" But he didn't answer, he just disappeared. "He means that if we don't get back to the others by the time it's dark, the clone's going to." Neji didn't finish that sentence. They all knew what would happen. "We must go, now," Guy ordered. They all ate soldier pills and ran back the way they came at full speed. They had to get back to the others now. Sokka was trying to reach for the creature, but had a hard time considering the creature was behind him and was pulling on his wolf tail. "Okay, karma person or thing, whoever is charge of this stuff," he said aloud. "If I can just get out of this situation alive, I will give up meat and sarcasm, okay?" The creature finally pulled off the small band of leather that held the wolf tail together, making the tribesman give a small yelp in pain and giving him some really messy hair. That's all I got. It's pretty much my whole identity. Sokka, the meat and sarcasm guy, but I'm willing to be Sokka the veggies and straight talk fellow, deal. You might want wait on that idea, a now familiar voice told him. He looked up and saw the robed spirit. Saifu, he said in greeting. Turning his head to look at the creature, he saw that it was frozen in mid-motion. Frozen in a moment. The spirit nodded. Are you in charge of this whole karma thing? No, but I happen to be good friends with the person who is. But more importantly, I'm here to talk to you, Saifu told him. What do you want to talk about? You, he answered. You don't have to put yourself down like that. Meat and sarcasm are not your whole identity. Well, what else is there? It seemed like everything at that point to him. How about the fact that you're a planner, a thinker, an inventor, or that you're good with weapons? When he heard those facts, he knew that it was the truth. But he still had doubts. What are you trying to say, Saifu? He asked, wanting a straight answer. Do you know why you're with this group? I had to tag along to make sure my little sister didn't do something stupid and come up with the plans in the process. He asked, half sarcastic and half serious. True, but you're also here to remind the benders that they are still human. You're here so that they never get a swelled head and think that they are all powerful. They see you and they see what they can become without their bending. So I'm a reminder that they could just be as weak as me. He couldn't see it, but somehow, he knew that the spirit was grinning. Did I ever say that you were the weakest? If anything, you're the strongest one in the group. Thanks, Saifu, I needed that, he said quietly. That last part made him feel a bit better. That's what a Saifu does, he teaches and encourages. With that said, Saifu disappeared, and time began to flow again. At that point, Aang showed up. Aang, thank goodness. Have you got any meat? Sokka asked, happy to see his friend. Aang ran up to him. Sokka, are you okay? He asked. He reached for the tribesman's arms and tried to pull him out of the crevice. It didn't really work. Stop, stop. You're going to pull my arms off. Sokka told the avatar. He could feel his arms being pulled, but the rest of his body was staying put. Aang stepped back. I bet I can airbend you out of here, he said. Sokka could hear the uncertainty in his voice. The airbender tried to bend a huge column of air from underneath Sokka's feet. But the only result was his hair being shaped up into a semi-mohawk, which was flattened by the hilt of his machete. Seriously, Aang, I know you're new at it, but I could use a little earthbending here, he told his friend, looking expectantly at him. Aang turned to face away from him. I can't do it, he admitted, feeling embarrassed by that simple fact. Well, if you can't earthbend me out of here, go get Toph. I can't do that either. You can't, why not? It was a simple enough of a request. Why couldn't he do it? It would just be really uncomfortable, Aang said, trying to explain. Uncomfortable? Sokka asked with full and obvious sarcasm. Well, I wouldn't want you to feel uncomfortable. Thanks, Sokka, the air nomad told him, sitting down next to the crevice and completely missing the sarcasm. This whole earthbending thing really has me confused. There's so much pressure. Everybody expects me to get it right away. It puts me in a really awkward position. Awkward position, I think I know the feeling, he said, again with obvious sarcasm. But again, Aang didn't get it. If I try, I fail. But if I don't try, I'm never going to get it. I feel like I'm caught between a rock and hard place. It felt embarrassing to him. He was the Avatar. He was supposed to be the master of all four elements. And yet, he couldn't even do one of them. He just didn't know what to do. Sokka just looked at him. Aang, can you do me a favor? What? Bring your head down closer to me. Aang wasn't sure what he wanted but brought his head down anyway. A little closer, Sokka urged him. He brought it closer. That should do it. And without warning, the tribesman proceeded to smack him upside the head, hard. Ow! What was that for? Aang demanded with tears in his eyes. He had never known Sokka to do something like that. The sting that came with the smack seemed to burn on his head, making him feel all of it. Are you done whining? Stop being a little kid who stops doing something because you yelled at about doing it wrong once. Get your act together, the water paragon ordered him, his voice becoming hard. I just told you I don't care, Aang. Sokka shouted him down. Stop having a pity party. This morning, you woke up everybody because you were so excited to learn earthbending. You say it's hard for you to learn this, well Noda. Did you expect it to be easy? Toph said it herself, it's a stubborn element. That means you must be stubborn as well. Stop complaining about it being hard and deal with it. He sat there in silence until he finally nodded his head. You're right, Sokka. Sorry about complaining there. Don't apologize to me. I've been here all day. Just then the creature came back. Aang, this is my friend, Fufu Cuddly Poops. Fufu Cuddly Poops, Aang, the tribesman introduced the two of them. Aang picked up the creature. Ah, what a cute name for a little baby saber-tooth moose lion cub, he declared, standing up. Really? Wondered Sokka. He looks nothing like a saber-tooth mouse lion. It's hard to tell before their giant teeth and horns grow in. He looked closer at Fufu. What are you doing out here, little guy? Did you lose your mama? The loud growl behind him was his answer. Turning around, Aang saw Fufu's mother, a fully grown saber-tooth moose lion. Waterbenders deal with the flow of energy, Iroh explained to Zuko as the two of them practice a basic waterbending move. A waterbender lets their defense become their offense, turning their opponent's energy against them. I learned the way to do this with lightning. You can teach me how to redirect lightning? Zuko asked, surprised. That was something he had never heard before. He nodded. If you let the energy in your own body flow, the lightning will follow it. You must create a pathway from your fingertips, up your arm to your shoulder, then down to your stomach. The stomach is the source of energy in your body. It is called the Sea of Chi. Only in my case it is more like a vast ocean. He laughed at his own joke. Zuko said nothing, so he continued. From the stomach, you direct it up again and out the other arm. The stomach detour is critical. You must not let the lightning through your heart, or the damage could be deadly. You may wish to try a physical motion, to get a feel for the pathway's flow. He took a stance. Like this. Zuko copied the stance and began to mimic his uncle. Slowly but surely, they went through the motions. Now, are you focusing your energy? Can you feel your own chi flowing in, down, up, and out? Iroh asked him. I think so, Zuko said. It felt a little weird, doing a form that wasn't a part of firebending. Come on, you've got to feel the flow. Iroh moved his arms like a worm to emphasize his point. They kept practicing a few more times. Excellent, you've got it. He said when he saw that his nephew's movements had gotten smoother. Great, I'm ready to try it with real lightning. Zuko exclaimed. What? Are you crazy? Lightning is extremely dangerous, he protested. I thought that was the point. You're teaching me how to protect myself from it. That was what the exiled prince thought. How else was he supposed to see if it worked or not? But Iroh had a look of semi-panic on his face. Yeah, but I'm not going to shoot lightning at you. If you're lucky, you will never have to use this technique at all. Frustrated and annoyed, he looked out to the horizon and saw storm clouds gathering. Suddenly, he had an idea. Well, if you won't help me, I'll find my own lightning. He took off on the ostrich horse in the direction of the storm clouds. Hey there, Aang said to the adult animal. We found your cub. He held up Fufu to emphasize his point. Then he put him on the ground and watched as he ran into the bush behind his mother. See? We have no problem with you, we're friendly. Mrs. Cuddly Poops didn't seem to agree. She lowered her head and looked like she was about to charge. Aang, I don't think that worked, Sokka warned him. Mrs. Cuddly Poops roared her challenge and charged at them. When she got close to Aang, he bent the air to send over his and Sokka's head. She landed safely and looked like this was about to charge. "This is bad," the tribesman said. "Get me out so I can fight." "I don't think that's," he tried to say. "We don't have the time, Aang. Get me out of here," Sokka ordered, cutting him off. He did the earth-bending motions, but Sokka was still trapped in the crevice. Meanwhile, Mrs. Cuddly Poops began to paw the ground. "Oh no," said Aang before jumping over to a nearby rock. "Woohoo, look at me." He started to do a silly dance to get her attention. It didn't work. She charged directly at Sokka, intent on goring him. Realizing what was about to happen, Aang hopped off the rock and knocked her aside via airbending. Again, Mrs. Cuddly Poops landed safely. "Please don't leave me like that again," Sokka said. That had been a very scary moment for him. "I won't," Aang told him. For the third time, Mrs. Cuddly Poops charged. But this time, he was ready. When she got close, he blasted her with a lot of air, making her skid backwards. She finally got the hint and decided to leave. At that moment, both Sokka and Aang heard someone clapping. Turning their heads to the sound, they saw Toph sitting on nearby rock. "What are you doing here?" Sokka asked her. "Just enjoying the show," she answered. She sounded completely relaxed. "What? You were there the whole time?" Aang asked her. "Pretty much." "Why didn't you do something?" he demanded, outraged. Sokka was in trouble. "I was in trouble. You could have gotten him and helped us get away. Guess it just didn't occur to me." She tossed a nut down to the ground, pulled out Aang's gilder staff and swung it down to crack the nut. The idea was stopped when Aang grabbed hold of the staff. "Enough, I want my staff back." He was sick and tired of her attitude. He wanted what was his and he wanted it now. She let go of the thing and hopped down from the rock. "Do it now," she ordered him. "What?" "Earthbend, Twinkle Toes," she clarified. "You just stood your ground against a crazy beast, and even more impressive, you stood your ground against me. You've got the stuff." But he tried to protest. "Do it," she shouted at him. Angry and annoyed with her for everything that had happened that day, he didn't know what else to do. So, he channeled those emotions and did as he was told. He took the stance and pushed a nearby rock. It went sliding away before falling over. "You did it. You're an earthbender," Toph told him. "I can't believe it," Aang said with joy. He had thought it was difficult, but now? It had been easy. "Ah, this is really a wonderful, touching moment," Sokka said with subtle sarcasm. "So could you get me out of her so I can give both a big, snuggly hug?" He was beginning to feel his legs go numb. "No problem, Sokka," the Avatar told him. He was about to try and do it when Toph stopped him. "Actually, you should probably let me do that. You're still a little new to this. You might accidentally crush him," she warned him. "Yeah, no crushing, please," Sokka agreed. He didn't want any crushing happening to him. She walked over, bent him out of the crevice up to his knees and pulled him the rest of the way out by his hair. Later, they got back to the camp area where they met up with Katara, Momo, and Akela. "You found him," Katara cried, running over and giving her brother a hug. "Sorry about that," he apologized. "I was hunting a saber-toothed moose lion cub and ended up being stuck in a hole." He threw a look at his wolf. "Don't even start, Akela," he warned. Akela just grinned wolfishly. "Hey Katara, look what I can do," Aang called out. He bent a large piece of rock down to the ground. "You did it. I knew you would," she told him. She then whispered to Toph. "You tried the positive reinforcement, didn't you?" "Yep, it worked wonders," the earthbender answered. Next time, she would be sure to use it. The resident sky bison decided to make an appearance. "Appa, Appa," Aang said excitingly. "I can earthbend now. The key is being completely rooted, physically and mentally unmovable." Appa decided to give Aang a big lick, which sent him flying. This sent both him and Sokka into hysterics. "Hey, guys," Toph called out. Team Guy is back. She could feel them coming through the earth. Sure enough, Team Guy appeared in under a minute. Spread out, we have to find that clone. Guy ordered. Hey, what's going on? Aang asked, making them stop. Naruto had a cage bunch in tracking us since we left Tuzin. If we don't find it before nightfall, it's going to sneak in and kill you, he quickly explained. That's impossible, Toph protested. I would have felt him. There's nobody here except us. She was sure of it. Her feet never lied to her. She's right, Neji said, as he looked around with an activated Byakugan. I don't see anyone except for us. He kept looking around, but he saw no one. Hang on, Tenten said. It's possible that he knows about Toph being able to see via the ground, and he definitely knows about the Byakugan. He might be staying just out of range so that we won't see him. If that's true, we have to look for him now before he gets to us, Guy said. He turned to the others. You four stay here. Under no circumstance should all of you go to sleep. If they did, the clone could easily sneak in and slice their throats. Guy, wait. Sokka yelled, stopping Team Guy before they ran off. What is it? They had to go, and this wasn't the time for distractions. There's a piece of paper in your headband, he pointed out. Guy reached for the piece of paper, opened it, and read what was written. Guy-sensei, what does it say? Lee asked. Guy didn't say anything. He just simply handed the paper to Neji, who read it to the group. You people sure are gullible. There was only the one clone. He was bluffing. Lee asked as if he couldn't believe it. He couldn't have been. Tenten protested. He told us about the hidden clone. No, he didn't, Neji said as he remembered the conversation. He only asked us if we thought the first clone had only made one clone. He also never actually said that he had sent a clone after us, we came to that conclusion ourselves. He must have put the note in my headband during the fight, Guy noted. That means. He stopped talking as all members of Team Guy realized what it meant. It means what? Toph asked. She didn't know what it meant, and she would like some clarification. It means that Naruto knew what we were going to try to do if he tried to leave the fight. He knew that we would threaten to go after the girls. He had his bluff ready before we had even gotten there, Neji explained. He never felt so foolish before. They had been duped into not going after him when they had the chance. Katara then saw that Guy was crying. What's the matter, Guy? What's with the tears? She asked him. He smiled. These are tears of happiness. He really was a fine Konoha shinobi. The storm raged all around Zuko, and yet he stared defiantly at it. You've always thrown everything you could at me. Well, I can take it, and now I can give it back. He yelled. Thunder boomed and lightning struck in the distance, but none of it came near him. Go on, strike me. He roared. You've never held back before. And yet, the storm seemed to mock him. Finally, his tears mixed with the rain and he howled his frustration to the sky. As he cried on the mountain top, he heard a voice in the distance. Why? It asked faintly. It sounded like an echo that faded away in the storm. Who's there? Show yourself. Zuko commanded as he rose to his feet. He tried to see who it was talking but saw nothing. Why? It asked again, this time more clearly. What do you mean why? He wasn't sure, but he thought he saw a faint shadow moving in the clouds. He tried to follow the shadow, but lost sight of it. Why do you do this? What are you trying to prove? That I am not as weak as everyone thinks I am. To prove I don't have to fear lightning. And, he silently added, to also prove that he wasn't afraid of his sister. Thunder boomed, but oddly enough, there was no lightning. The voice chuckled. You should always fear lightning, boy, fear it and respect it, the voice chastised him as the shadow reappeared. He kept his eyes fixed on that shadow, trying not to lose it. If you want to say something, then come out and face me instead of hiding like a coward. He ordered with all the authority he could muster. Insolent child! Roared the voice, suddenly enraged. Before the prince's eyes, he saw a pair of solid gold eyes flash briefly in the storm clouds. Do you not know who you insult? If you wish so much to be struck by lightning, then come and take it. He heard a bestial roar before he saw a large stream of lightning coming directly at him. He quickly took the stance his uncle showed him. But then he realized something just as the lightning struck. He realized that the booming of thunder sounded more like the flapping of wings. He took the lightning in through his arm and let it travel down, but it wasn't easy. It felt like his entire body was being tortured. Arg! The pain. It's too much. Let it stop, dear Agni, let it stop. His mind screamed as it was clouded by pain. He felt like he couldn't hold on, that he would die if it went on. But as the lightning was about to reach his heart, he broke through the cloud of pain. No. I will not die because of this. He then forced the lightning down into his stomach and then up into his other arm. And then, he threw the lightning in the same direction it came. As it disappeared and the echo faded away, he stood just there, panting in the rain and trying to get his breath back. Then he heard the voice again, and this time it was laughing. It has been a long time since someone has insulted me to my face, and an even longer time since someone has tried to fight me. You remind me so much of him, it said. It didn't sound enraged anymore, more like it was fondly remembering something. Who's him? Zuko asked cautiously. Lightning struck down in front of him, making him leap back. But what he saw surprised him. In the exact spot where the lightning struck stood another Zuko. It was the same face, the eyes, and the same build. But that was where the similarities ended. To start off, Zuko could see through him a little bit, so he knew that it was a shade. He wore an ancient set of armor and his hair was tied back in a braid. But it was the scars that set him apart. Like Zuko, his left eye had been burned. But unlike Zuko, his right eye has also been burned, giving him an almost mask-like appearance. Who is that? Is that me? The exiled prince asked. No, but you are related to him, the voice told him. How? He asked, idly wondering how the voice was sure of that. He looked closer and saw that the shade wore something familiar around his neck. That's the Fire Nation Paragon Medallion. This man was a paragon of the Fire Nation. He was the first. He was a good man, the voice said, the fondness becoming more obvious. He looked out into the storm again, looking for the shadow. Who are you? He called out, wanting to know. Again, the eyes showed themselves. This time, they came with a head. It was vague and covered by the storm clouds, but he could tell it was a dragon's head. I am the dragon that many searched for, but only a few will meet. You have joined those few. The head, eyes, and voice disappeared, and the storm kept on raining, this time without the thunder and lightning. Zuko fell to the ground in surprise. He had just insulted, talked to, and threw lightning at a legendary dragon that his great-grandfather, grandfather, and father had all searched for in their youth. He had just met the Dragon King, the firstborn of Agni, Bahamut. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.